Chapter 217. Alliance. It was a word that made Duke feel very happy. Before transmigrating, Duke had never thought that he would witness this moment in history. The huge golden bell was rung, and the long iron chain pulled the gears and struck the bell, producing a melodious and pleasant sound that spread throughout the entire Rotterdam kingdom. In the east, southeast, south, southwest, west, northwest, north, and northeast, the rich Rotterdam kingdom laid out a red carpet from the city gate to the Rotterdam kingdom's capital for the kings and representatives of the 8 kingdoms. Similarly, the soldiers of Lordaren lined up neatly along the red carpet all the way to the capital. Walking on the red carpet on the streets of the capital, there were girls on the 2nd and 3rd floor of the tall houses on both sides, scattering beautiful flower petals towards the streets, forming a beautiful rain of flowers. The people of Lordaren cheered, welcoming the kings and representatives of the various countries as heroes. King Lang Rin of Stormwind, King Aiden Pyrenod of Alter, King Jean Greymane of Gilneas, King Dalen Proudmoore of Cultivation, King Salas Trollbane of Stormguard, Riptide Fortress, Breaking Dawn Wizard Antonidas of the Dalajan Kirin Tor Tower Parliament. High Elves represented Senator Dalcan of the Silver Moon Parliament. Dwarves represented Prince Magni Bronzebeard of the Iron Furnace Castle. Because the Iron Furnace Castle was besieged by the orcs, King Madoran Bronzebeard could not leave, so he sent Magni, who was known as the King of Blacksmiths. Together with Muradin Bronzebeard, who was originally the ambassador of the Iron Furnace Castle in Lordaren, Lordaren now had 2 dwarven princes. It could be said that other than the High Elves, all the countries sent their highest-level leaders to attend. This had never happened in the past 1,000 years. In a sense, this also represented the strength of Lordaren. The leaders of the 8 countries arrived together, and King Tyrrhenas did not care who he welcomed first. He simply waited in the throne room for the leaders of the 8 countries. The 8 doors of the Rotterdam kingdom were all opened, and the leaders of the various countries entered the magnificent palace almost at the same time, stepping into the throne hall. In the tall and spacious Gothic throne hall, the arches and pillars that were covered with pure white reliefs were the most beautiful works of art in themselves. The master artist used the reliefs to describe the story of Thoradin the Great's pioneering for mankind and the building of Lordaren. A huge 7-colored glass window hung at the top of the ceiling and in 9 directions. Sunlight shone in, and the entire vault was filled with colorful and beautiful colors. The orange rainbow light blended with the amethyst-like light, and the ruby light and amber light complemented each other. The entire vault looked incomparably gorgeous. Meanwhile, the lower half had the most scientific diffuse reflection system. Sunlight shone through the transparent, pure-colored glass windows and landed on the large stone balls suspended in the middle of the throne room. The light was then reflected onto every throne. This kind of warm and mysterious radiance made everyone feel a mysterious sublimation of their souls. He didn't make things difficult for anyone, nor did he look down on anyone. The 360-degree circular throne room was divided into 9 equal parts. Tyrrhenas Menethil II stood in front of the throne in the north. Tyrrhenas spoke as he watched the kings arrive in front of his seat. 2,800 years ago, in order to fight against a common enemy, the trolls, the human Arather Empire and the High Elves Kuel Salis Kingdom formed an alliance and established an eternal covenant. 1,200 years ago, although the Arather Empire disintegrated for a better future, the human kingdoms were still united as brothers, and there has never been a war between the kingdoms. Now, we all have a common enemy, the orcs. I hope that this time, we can reach an unbreakable and powerful covenant that unites the humans, elves, and dwarves. Menethil II's official declaration was not very exciting, but at least it was flawless. After everyone applauded, the kings and representatives sat down. Let me first report on the situation at Riptide Castle. Magni Bronzebeard's loud voice sounded first. The dwarves were known for their impatience. For example, the dwarves used fishing rods. How about it? That didn't sound like a problem, right? The problem was that this so-called fishing rod was actually a gun. What? You use fishing nets to fish in the stream. The dwarves shot at any fish they saw in the shallow water, and all the fish died. If they could blow up fish, they would not fish with nets. If they could kill fish, they would not fish. The dwarves' temperament was obvious. Magni waved his hand, and the specially invited Dalajan mage immediately used a magic mirror to show the fierce battle at the gate of Iron Stove Castle. In this world where swords and magic were the core, the dwarves' black technology was only second to the gnomes and gnomes. In the dwarven main force, there were dwarven cannons like mortars, dwarven steam tanks, and so on. Didn't it sound like a completely mechanized army? The problem was that the orcs were King demolition workers. An orc warrior spun a huge 4-meter-long iron pipe, thicker than a human leg, like a windmill. The dwarves relied on the mountain's terrain to make the 5 to 6-ton steam tank charge down the narrow mountain path. Unexpectedly, the berserk orcs swept it horizontally, and it exploded at the foot of the mountain. When the dwarves fought against the orcs, they were not much weaker in terms of strength, but in terms of size, they were at an absolute disadvantage. The orcs swung those heavy weapons and smashed them down. In the crowded battlefield, the dwarves who had nowhere to hide could only take the hits. The result was that the two sides repeatedly fought on the mountain path in front of the Iron Stove Castle's main gate. The dwarves only fired 1 shot a minute or so, but it was very powerful. The orcs also threw stones unreasonably. Not just the orcs, but there were also the figures of larger, more terrifying strength and endurance of the ogres in the tribe's formation. The dwarves had suffered heavy losses. Turning off the live stream, Magni slapped his hand on the handle of his custom-made and slightly less luxurious dwarf chair, giving Tarina's a fright. Iron Stove Castle urgently needs reinforcements. What we need most are priests and medicine. Also, those damned green dwarfs ruined our farmland. Our entire autumn harvest is ruined. We also need a lot of food. The dwarves were just that straightforward. They needed food. They needed medicine. Tarina's had to remind Magni, we are now discussing the threat of the horde. We need to confirm the need to form an alliance first, then discuss how to support each other and how to deal with the horde. Alright, then let's form the alliance. Where do we seal it? With that, Magni took out a royal seal that was very characteristic of the dwarves, the hammer in his hand. The human kings were all speechless. Chapter 218. King Salas Trollbane of Stormguard spoke. The solder bridge was also under heavy attack. Thanks to King Stormwind Lang's valuable experience, we did not suffer too many losses. After saying this, he also played a live video. The situation here was much better. The orcs could not pass through the huge straits with strong winds and strong waves, so they could only attack the narrow solder bridge. Unlike the dwarves, where the horde could climb mountains, the orcs only had 2 bridges that looked wide during normal times, but felt narrow during battles. 30 meters wide sounded like a lot. The terrain in the northern continent was slightly higher, otherwise, why would it be called the Earthy Highlands? However, they had to withstand the firepower of more than 100 ballistae and catapults that were deployed along the mountain to the north of the bridge, as well as more than 30 arrow towers and 1,000 javelin team members who hid in the blockhouses in shifts day and night. 30 meters? That was a target, all right? No matter how brave the orcs were, they would only be cannon fodder. If this bridge had not been made by the dwarves and was extremely sturdy, an ordinary bridge would have collapsed long ago. Thus, the Stormguard people only sacrificed manpower and resources, not lives. King Salas did not forget to give King Lang a grateful look when he played the video. Without Stormwind's full set of javelin manufacturing blueprints, the warriors of Riptide's stronghold would probably still be fighting the orcs with useless bows and arrows. Not only blueprints, but a large number of craftsmen had also come to help Stormguard make the javelins while teaching the craftsmen of Riptide's stronghold. The alliance had not yet been officially established, but Stormwind was already doing its part as an ally. Moreover, before today's meeting, Duque had already made it clear to King Salas that if Riptide's stronghold needed help, his 7,000 private soldiers could go to the Earthy Highlands at any time. Of course, Salas Trollbane did not know that according to the situation, he would not have the opportunity to use such reinforcements. And it just so happened that Duque knew this, which was why he had come to offer his help. Salas had been greatly frightened by the orcs, and now that he had such a loyal ally who promised to help him for free, Salas was so touched that he almost cried and snot flowed out of his nose. If he knew that Duque turned around and muttered to himself, "It feels so good to be able to increase favorability by making a promise that doesn't need to be fulfilled." He might even want to kill Duque. Of course, these were all assumptions. With the orcs as their enemy, as well as the support of the craftsmen from Duke Stormwind Duke Marcus, Stormguard was definitely a country that responded positively to the alliance. However, it was relative. Apart from the Rotterdam kingdom that had just been slapped in the face by the orc slaves, the kings of the few countries that were closer to the north behaved rather indifferently. This was especially so for the representative of the High Elves, Councillor Dalcan of the Silver Moon Parliament. This fellow was actually admiring his newly manicured nails. Lang and Andoin could not help but frown. Why are these guys still observing at a time like this? Andoin was the most direct. He secretly kicked Duque and whispered, "Don't you still have information to submit?" Duque rolled his eyes at Lothar, and finally raised his hand. "I, Duke Marcus of Karazhan of Stormwind, have important information to submit." Those who could attend the meeting, even if they were standing behind the king, were all important ministers of the kingdom. King Terenas nodded. "I agree to submit." In the history of the alliance, one of the biggest losses was that the leaders of the various countries had initially thought that the orcs did not know how to build ships. Now, what Duque submitted was an image that he had personally sent Darnielle and the search team of 3 ships to retrieve. The huge mirror showed the scene of a group of orc laborers working in full swing. Although the work of these crude fellows was completely unsightly, it could still be clearly seen that it was the keel of a ship. This time, the one who reacted the most violently was King Kurtiras, Dylin Proudmoore. He stood up from his throne and stared at the image with his bulging eyes. If the orcs had a large fleet, Kurtiras would have nowhere to escape. It could be said that apart from Duque's fleet, Kurtiras had no other reinforcements. That was not the end. Duque continued. "This is the image of Barradin Bay in the northwest of the southern continent. It happens to be separated from South Shore by a sea. As everyone knows, we, Stormwind, have a fleet of more than 100 warships, more than 10,000 murlocs, and hundreds of naga. Even without Kurtiras' fleet, we dare to say that we can defend South Shore. However, there is nothing we can do in other places." In the center of the 7 thrones and the 2 representative seats, in front of the huge map of the Eastern Kingdom, Duque let a hand of magic float gently on the map. From the Barradin Bay to the west, around South Shore, to the north of the land. At this time, it was King Xion of the Gilnea's kingdom's turn to look bad. Of course, King Terenas of Lordaeron was also in a bad mood. Because near the finger of Duque's hand of magic was the North Stream coast, which was convenient for landing. What was the coast? Wasn't it Lordaeron's Silverpine Forest? At this time, Duque said seriously, "Of course, this is just a guess." Maybe. The direction of the hand of magic changed. This time, it went east from Barradin Bay, all the way under Sodder Bridge, to the southeast of the northern continent, and then north along the Cape. This time, it went over the steep Arthi Highlands, which was full of elemental creatures, and pointed further north to the east coast of the hinterlands. This time, it was King Alterac's turn to look bad, but his reaction was not too intense. "Is it there? That's even better. Let those damned trolls fight the green-skinned monsters," Eden argued. "What if those trolls join the tribe?" Duque asked back with a cold smile. Eden was very, very unhappy with Duque's questioning. "Then at least those dwarves from the Eagle Nest Mountain will be at the front." As soon as Eden's voice fell, Dwarf Prince Magni was not happy. "Hey, King of Alterac, watch your tone. Those are our dwarven brothers." "That's right, brothers who fight and kill each other." Eden shot a disdainful glance at Mag. "Bastard. Even after the War of the 3 Hammers. But we've made up with the Wild Hammer dwarves. I'm warning you, don't insult our Wild Hammer brothers again, or I'll not let you off." Magni waved his hammer angrily. Eden snorted coldly and answered with silence. It was a sign that he did not want to pursue the matter further. Beside Magni, Muradin Bronzebeard, who had been an ambassador for many years, was more tactful. He pulled his brother back. Duque glanced at King Eden. Although he quickly retracted his gaze, Noxus still saw that moment of disdain. That was the look of disdain when looking at a dead man. Duque's deduction based on the orc's shipbuilding ended here. If it wasn't for the heavy atmosphere, Lang almost wanted to applaud Duque's wonderful deduction. In any case, Duque had successfully established the common foundation of the entire alliance. Chapter 219. As a transmigrator who was familiar with history, Duque had a huge advantage at this moment. He did not want to cheat a certain race with long ears, but he knew very well that some members of the alliance could not be invited and were in a hurry. It did not matter if it was out of arrogance, or that this country was a scum. In any case, he would never mention this possibility. After all, the biggest difference on the Horde's side had already appeared: Lord Howl's groom Hellscream. Since Lord Howl was here, then the Warsong clan that was supposed to stay in Draenor was likely to appear. No, it was very likely that they had already appeared on the other side of the Solder Bridge. It was just that the ones attacking the bridge now were unknown small clans, so there was no way to confirm it. Since Ghoul Dan had reopened the Dark Portal, then the clans that were supposed to stay might appear. For example, the future Lich King Nizul's Shadowmoon clan, or Kargath Bladefist's Shatterpalm clan. There were more than 10 famous clans. Now that the Blackrock clan was heavily injured, any reinforcements were possible. For the final victory, Duque had long decided to drag down more of the original allies that belonged to the alliance. Duque retreated after he finished speaking. King Terenas of Lordaeron raised his head slightly. "All right, everyone, do you have more information about the evil orcs to share with the kings here?" The surroundings were silent. If not, I suggest that we start voting now on whether to form a strong alliance to fight against the evil orc tribe that is bent on conquering the entire world of Azeroth. Please note that we are now discussing the formation of a military alliance. Every country that joins the alliance has the obligation to help each other. They can either provide money, manpower, or directly send troops. Countries that refuse to join will not receive help from the alliance when faced with the Horde's attack. Alright, that's all I have to say. Those who agree to join this alliance, please raise your hand. Originally, the atmosphere was very good. From Lang's point of view, with this momentum, forming an alliance was a sure thing. No matter how one looked at it, it would be a matter of course, and all 9 countries would join the alliance. Lang was a little excited just thinking about it. As long as the alliance was formed, would the 9 countries not be able to defeat the Horde? Taking back Stormwind City and rebuilding the foundation of his ancestors depended on this. Who knew that at this moment, Magni's loud voice could be heard again. "Hey, wait a minute. Have any of you agreed to help the Ironforge? Without any reinforcements, just relying on the dwarves in the southern continent to hold back the orcs? Is this what you mean by helping each other?" King Terenas looked displeased. The dwarves were always so direct. He had to interrupt Magni Bronzebeard. "Since we are forming an alliance, we will definitely help each other. What we need to do now is to set the framework, and then decide how to assist, how to coordinate." The dwarf prince, whose beard was so long that it almost reached the ground, showed his straightforward nature. No, I hate to hear the official terminology of you humans. We dwarves are very direct. Is there any help? When and where? Quantity? Personnel? If they can really provide us with enough aid and support, we, the Iron Stove Fort, will join. If not, then I won't waste my time here. I'll hurry back and kill a few more beastmen. Magni's shameless extortion made all the human kings frown. At this moment, more than one king had his own plans. As a country that had already been attacked, the beastmen were not people who would stop until they succeeded. The dwarves would not give up their own capital. If that was the case, even if the humans did not help, the dwarves would fight the beastmen to the death and drag down a large portion of the beastmen's forces. In a split second, more than one king was prepared to abandon the dwarves. In history, they did the same. In fact, this was not a very nice thing to do, and it caused a few countries in the alliance to appear united, but actually divided. In the original process, the dwarves only officially joined the alliance when the humans attacked the wetlands and broke into Dan Maluo, saving the dwarves who had been bitterly defending for a long time. But Duque was here. Enough! Duque suddenly shouted. Since you dwarves see the alliance as an exchange of benefits, then we can do it, seeing that we have a common enemy. In 3 days, Stormwind's fleet can reach the deep waters southeast of the wetlands, Blackwater Moor. We will give you 10,000 peacebloom and silverleaf flowers, 20,000 heather grass, and 5,000 setback grass. In exchange, we need 15,000 fine steel longswords made by the dwarves. If you don't have them, you can use the standard dwarven battle axes instead. Anyone with a bit of common sense would know that these were low-grade alchemy materials, used to make low-grade healing potions. In a war of this level, high-grade materials were not used much, because high-grade alchemists were needed, and the production would decrease. In contrast, low-grade materials were more useful, because alchemy apprentices had a lot of them. Finished products were hard to get, but getting potion materials was definitely a pleasant surprise. Magni was stunned that Duque was so well prepared. Iron Stove Castle did need help, but Magni was putting more pressure on the newly formed alliance. He did not expect the humans to have any preparations. In his imagination, it would take at least half a month to prepare. He only wanted a more specific promise from the human kings, so that he could confirm whether the humans wanted to use the dwarves as cannon fodder. But Duque had undoubtedly outmaneuvered him. This was a meeting of the kings, and Duque would not make empty promises. Either Duque was the biggest liar, trying to trick him into joining the alliance on behalf of the dwarves. Either that, or the Stormwind Kingdom had really made ample preparations for this war. It was obvious that the Stormwind Kingdom had come prepared. Stormwind, who was eager to destroy the orcs and restore their kingdom, would not trick the dwarves on such a matter. Magni froze, and his expression turned from anger to joy. It was ecstasy. The dwarf prince was also shameless. No, it should be said that he had no shame or integrity to speak of. He immediately apologized. Sorry. My heart was filled with thoughts of my brothers and sisters in Iron Stove Castle who were injured and unable to receive treatment. I was too emotional. I should not have doubted you humans. Lang had no idea that Duque had done so many things. Lang knew that Duque would never lie to him about such things. He stood up. Prince Magni Bronzebeard, as long as we join the alliance, we will be brothers in life and death. I can promise you that Benedict, the Archbishop of Stormwind, will be willing to lead the priests to our brothers in the alliance to help heal our allies. Chapter 220. The Archbishop of Stormwind. This was a huge bet. Lang had always been known as a wise king. As the dwarf kingdom not far north of Stormwind, Magni obviously trusted Lang more. As for Tarinas, who was full of official words but had no substance, Magni raised his hammer. I represent the Iron Furnace Castle's bronze-bearded dwarves in joining the alliance. Tarinas was not happy with Magni stealing the spotlight, but he would not make things difficult for the dwarves. After all, it was not his Lord Darren that had pledged their support. Then let's vote. The Stormwind Kingdom agrees. Ryan almost rushed to express his opinion. Everyone knew that Stormwind, which had lost its capital, was the most miserable. There was no point in pretending to be in a hurry. It was better to be the leader and promoter. King Dahlin and King Salas spoke at the same time. Kultiras agrees. Stormguard agrees. At this moment, for countries had already agreed. As long as the leader of the Lordaeron Kingdom agreed, the alliance would be formed. At this time, the calm King Tarinas raised his hand. Lordaeron agrees. As the strongest human kingdom among the 7 major human kingdoms, the Rotterdam Kingdom's approval was expected, be it out of respect for their status as the leader of the various kingdoms, or as a response to the chaos caused by the orc slaves a few days ago. The Rotterdam Kingdom had to join. And with Lord Darren's participation, the remaining Dalajan, Gilnis, and Alterac who were slightly hesitant also joined. At this point, the 7 human kingdoms and the dwarves had all joined. All the kings and princes looked at the lowest-ranking representative in the throne room, Kuel Salas, member of the Silver Moon Council, Dakin. Faced with dozens of burning gazes, the handsome high elven mage raised his long eyebrows, took a sip of the best black tea produced by the Rotterdam Kingdom, and then said in a nonchalant tone, "I'm not interested in the matter." After discussion between the Silver Moon Council and His Majesty Anastrian Sunstrider, Kuel Salus will not join this alliance. But as a symbol of our friendship with the humans, we will give you the necessary assistance. Not joining the alliance? Give the necessary aid? Such arrogant and cold words were clearly saying, giving aid to you humans is completely a form of dog food that we're giving you. This time, a few kings stood up angrily and glared at Senator Dakin. To everyone's surprise, it was Magni who opened fire. Long ears. Aren't you afraid that those green-skinned creatures will take a big detour to find trouble with you first? At this moment, Duque secretly bared his teeth. Damn, you guessed it? That's right. In history, it was the orcs who had gone around half of the northern continent and went straight to Kuel Salus to find trouble with the High Elves. However, Darkin did not seem to mind at all. As if he had been struck by Duque's 7 deadly sins, he retorted, "The magic of the High Elves isn't something dwarves like you can imagine. Kuel Salus had the perfect magic defense system. You don't have to worry about our safety." With that, Darkin actually stood up, turned around, and left. Gone? He really left? This was no longer a slap to the face of the Lordaeron family, this was a slap to the face of the entire Alliance of 8. For a moment, a few kings even had the urge to declare war on Kuel Salus. After all, the human kings were not tribal chiefs. They did not become bosses just because they were good at fighting. Their rationality still told them to calm down. However, the group of kings told themselves that if something really happened to those long ears, they should just let them die. Duque, who was beside Lang, was a little puzzled. As a transmigrator and a veteran player, he remembered most of the history. Why didn't the High Elves attract so much hatred in his memory? Well, no matter what, the alliance was still established as Duque had imagined. After that, there was nothing for Duque to do. As the mastermind, Duque had temporarily completed his task. The rest of the matters such as distribution of military supplies, coordination of military operations, and intelligence gathering had nothing to do with Duque. Naturally, the one who argued with the king was the king. Although Lang really wanted Duque to be by his side to give him ideas, Duque's words choked Lang to death. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty, I still have 1,300 reports and documents to go through. If I continue to stay here, this number will double tomorrow. I don't rule out the possibility that there will be casualties among your citizens and soldiers during the winter due to various reasons not being handled in time. After all, South Shore is near the Alterac Mountains, and the winter here is much colder than in Stormwind City." Lang had no choice but to let Duque go back to the state guesthouse. Back at the state guesthouse, Makarov opened the door for Duque. As soon as Duque opened the door, he saw his little maid, Vanessa. Duque had originally wanted to be a bit more corrupt and had Vanessa wear a very modern black and white lace-made outfit. Then, the extremely independent Vanessa ignored the orders of the Duke of Karazhan and the Sky Mage Duke. She removed all the fancy lace on her own. The low-cut front lapel was removed, and it became tight. Her black dress was also so long that it almost reached her ankles. Don't even think about cat ears or anything like that. Alright. This was the maid outfit of this era. Duque wanted to say something more, but Vanessa snorted and turned away, not even looking at Duque. Duque would not go so far as to kill a 13-year-old girl. He just wanted to look good, it was not against the law. Sob sob. Forget it, the more I say, the more I cry. The bitter Duque buried his head in the sea of reports and documents. At least Duque was happy, but Lang and Andoin were really exhausted. The meetings between countries were filled with endless wrangling. For the benefit of their own countries, the kings were willing to go all out. 5 days. It took them 5 whole days to come up with a more complete plan. The alliance this time was also officially named the Rotterdam Alliance, just like in history. In fact, it was not until the Rotterdam Kingdom was destroyed in the future, when more races joined the alliance, that people removed the word Rotterdam from the front of the alliance and called it the Alliance. It was 1 more day than the 4 days in Duque's memory, mainly because Lang did not die. Also, the kings were not willing to let Tarinas be the leader of the alliance, because they felt that Tarina's Menethil wanted to take the opportunity of the Horde invasion to complete the unification of the human countries, and turn himself into the second Thoradin the Great. The kings of the 6 countries were sensitive to all this, and they all resisted Tarina's complete control of the alliance. In a sense, compromise itself was a part of politics. Sensing the strong opposition of the kings, Tarina's did not insist too much. Finally, on the 5th day, he made a suggestion that he thought was very cruel, to let Lothar, the son of Thoradin the Great, be the supreme commander of the alliance, while he would only be the leader in name. The countries would have to provide troops to Lothar according to their national strength. Chapter 221. It had to be said that Tarina's Menethil II's combat power was almost equal to 0, but his political value was definitely 100. While the king was still alive and kicking, he made a subordinate of the king the commander-in-chief of the 7 kingdoms. What else could it be if it wasn't an attempt to drive a wedge between the 7 kingdoms? Of course, Tarina's also said in a dignified manner, since our ancestors once gathered under the flag of Thoradin the Great more than 2,000 years ago, let us, the new alliance, look up to the same flag. After all, the 7 kingdoms were of the same origin, and Lothar was indeed the best flag. Cleon was also a king with supreme boldness and magnanimity. While Lothar was hesitating, Cleon agreed immediately. Don't hesitate, Anduin. You are our hope of reviving our kingdom. From the moment we left Stormwind City, didn't we swear together that we would revive Stormwind no matter what? Have you forgotten our oath? But I don't care about those empty titles. You are still the loyal you, and I am still the me who believes in you. Even if you don't believe in yourself, you have to at least believe in me, who has always believed in you. As long as our will and beliefs do not change, why should we care about the lies of others? Besides, if it's you, so what if I give the throne to you? I believe that if Stormwind is in your hands, it will also stand tall among the nations of the world. His words were very serious, so serious that it made all the sowing of discord lose its meaning. Moreover, he said it in front of the kings of the alliance. If Anduin Lothar was really a despicable person, it would not be impossible for him to seize the throne of Stormwind with the testimony of the kings. Cleon's words caused all the kings to be moved. However, these words that were almost tongue-twister expressed Lang's most sincere and complete trust. It was a supreme trust that surpassed life and the inheritance of his children. No. Lothar had wanted to refuse, but after seeing Lang's passionate and sincere eyes, his heart softened a little. After thinking for a moment, Lothar said, "Then, Lang, I hope to become a duke at least as the Duke of Stormwind." Lothar was interrupted before he could finish. No. King Tarina's walked over. Although he was under the gaze of the other kings, his voice was so soft that Lothar and Lang were sure that they were the only 2 people who could hear him. Tarina's explained, "Trust me, as a king, a duke of another kingdom and a knight of another kingdom walking around my territory, these are definitely 2 different mental states." That's right, in the eyes of the kings, knights were insignificant, but dukes were the pillars of the country. Lothar's eyelids twitched. Perhaps you might think that I'm trying to sow discord between you and your subjects, but unfortunately, this is the only choice. The ruler of Lordaeron continued to explain in a low voice, "Every king wants to deal with their tribe's problems on their own. At the same time, they are very reluctant to see another king enter their territory. Sir Lothar, you are not a king, and your position is not high, so they don't think you can gain anything from this. On the other hand, the nobility of your bloodline is enough for them to not think that they will be looked down upon by other kings." After thinking about it again and again, Lothar finally nodded. "All right, I accept the position of commander of the alliance." Lothar's voice had always been loud, and his acceptance made many kings heave a sigh of relief. Tarina's raised his head and arms. "Then, I declare that all disputes in the Lordaeron alliance are over. We will fight side by side, just like our ancestors did in the Arathar Empire." After confirming that every king had nodded, Tarina's continued, "Now, the only one who is suitable to lead our army, the one who inherited the bloodline of Thoradin the Great, Sir Anduin Lothar, has agreed. So, the kings of the alliance hereby announce that Sir Anduin Lothar, the general of Stormwind City, will be our supreme commander. The armies sent by each of our kingdoms must listen to his orders. Those who disobey will be punished severely in the name of the descendants of Arathar. The last obstacle to forming the alliance was finally cleared. As Terena's voice fell, the throne room, which had been noisy for several days, was finally filled with thunderous applause. Perhaps this was the roar of applause because they had a common enemy. Perhaps it was because they had the same bloodline. No matter what the motive was, it was not important. What was important was that this marked the reunification of mankind after thousands of years of division. It was not only the humans, but also the dwarves. This pan-human alliance had finally shown its sharp claws and teeth to the invaders. The 13th of October, the first year of the Dark Portal. It was the dawn of the day, and the morning fog covered the land as usual. The citizens of Lordaeron, who were still sleepy, stretched and started a new day of activities. Perhaps they were preparing to harvest food, or preparing to open their shops. Although they could not see the first rays of dawn, the people in the city knew that a new day had arrived. The light fog enveloped their beautiful brick and wood houses, and also covered the wide streets of the capital with a thin layer of gauze. Even so, this was still the beautiful Lordaeron that they were familiar with. Everything in their sight, the sounds in their ears, and the calm atmosphere of the city, everything was the same as before. But the next moment, as the messenger cavalry shouted along the street, everything was different. They shouted as they galloped. This was a method of spreading news that was only used when there was news of victory. It had been many years since the citizens of Lordaeron had encountered this method. Yes, the last time was when the heir of King Terenas, Prince Arthas, was born. On this day, every citizen of Lordaeron heard this news. In order to deal with the increasingly rampant orcs, Lordaeron, the 7 human kingdoms, and the dwarf kingdom of Cosmodan have formed a pan-human alliance, the Lordaeron Alliance. The leader of the alliance will be King Terenas Menethil II of Lordaeron. The supreme commander of the alliance will be the direct descendant of Thoradin the Great, the noble Sir Anduin Lothar. All allies must send troops, money, and manpower for Lothar to use. The most revered Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonso's Fail, announces that the Lordaeron Alliance is the representative of justice. The Church of Holy Light will join the alliance in the form of a church, and give every soldier of the alliance the blessing of the Holy Light and supreme courage. Within 3 days, this news spread like it had wings, and the entire world of humans and dwarves was excited. Chapter 222. In fact, many things happened on the 12th of October. Firstly, Lothar's military rank was set as the Grand Marshal of the Alliance. In order to show respect to the descendants of Thoradin the Great, the kings who joined the Alliance army were all admirals. Hence, there were the magical military ranks such as Admiral Wang Lin and Admiral Dalen Proudmoore. Since Duque controlled over 100 warships and 7,000 private soldiers from the previous Bloodsail fleet, he had 2 military ranks, Vice Admiral of the Alliance Navy and Brigadier General of the Army. As for how to unify them, Duque solved this problem during the banquet that night. That's right, the banquet. It was a once-in-a-millennium event for so many human kingdoms to unite. The Lordaeron Palace held a grand banquet that night. The nobles who didn't have the chance to come out all came out. Those who were qualified to enter were at least earls. Of course, earls and marquises were not qualified to go and have fun if they weren't dukes who commanded the army. Coincidentally, Duque was the star of the alliance, the inheritor of Mediv, the killer of Sargeras, the leader of the 100,000 tribes, the youngest sky mage, the Duke of Stormwind, and the owner of a large naval fleet. No matter which one it was enough to make Duque the center of attention. King Dalen had long black hair that smelled like seawater. His long and curly mustache made him look very masculine. One could tell from his well-defined face that Dalen was definitely a handsome man when he was young. Not long after the banquet started, he brought his eldest son, Drake, to Duque. Duque and Lang exchanged glances. Of course, Lang knew why Dalen came. In fact, Lang didn't understand Duque's decision. However, Duque's foresight was far better than his, so Lang agreed with Duque's decision in the end. Hello, Duke Marcus. As partners who are going to conquer the ocean and feed the orcs to the fishes, don't you think we should have a good chat? Dai Lin raised his crystal plate full of wine and touched it with Duke's plate. The two looked at each other and smiled. Then, Duke raised the plate towards Prince Cultiras to show his respect. Then he, Dai Lin, and Drake downed the wine in the plate in one gulp. Actually, I'm very envious of you mages. You used powerful magic to easily seize a fleet. You should know that it would take at least 3 years even if all the shipyards in Cultivate worked day and night. Duke smiled but did not say anything. Your Majesty proud. You're not thinking of asking me for the fleet that I obtained from the Bloodsail pirates, are you? Don't underestimate me. Even though most of those guys are from Cultivate, since you didn't get them from Cultivate, they are your spoils of war. Even if my men don't like them, as long as they still have the insignia of the Alliance on their ships, they are still our comrades. King Dai Lin was obviously a heroic man of the sea. If this was the era of the universe, he would be the overlord of the universe who said, "My journey is the sea of stars." Normal people would find it hard to dislike such a straightforward man, unless they were his enemies. Duque smiled. It was just as straightforward. Not only that, but there was also a kind of holy light in his smile. No matter who saw it, they would think that he was a selfless saint. That's right, Duque inherited the moral integrity of Mediv. According to the system notification, moral integrity divines skill, hypocrisy. Because the humanity you obtained is far beyond what you should have. If you let this part of humanity temporarily control your body, you will become a holy existence in the eyes of the world. You will be more like a saint who serves the public for the sake of the world. All beings of the non-evil alignment will believe you more easily. Duque opened his mouth. He didn't even deliberately lower his voice. No, actually, I want to say that I will be more at ease if my fleet is handed over to His Majesty Dai Lin, who is an expert in naval warfare. Dai Lin and the Drake father and son were stunned. They almost doubted their ears. Not only them, but even the surrounding nobles who were listening to their conversation were stunned. Dai Lin frowned. Duke Marcus, actually, I didn't mean, I know, but after serious consideration, this is the best choice to maximize the combat power of the Alliance's navy. In fact, I have also discussed this with His Majesty Rin, and His Majesty also supports my decision. As soon as Duque finished speaking, King Lang also walked over and nodded to Dai Lin with a smile. Duque continued, I may be a genius, but only in the field of magic and strategy. I am a novice in naval warfare. Over 100 warships can only be used as transport ships in my hands, but in His Majesty Proudmoore's hands, it is an unparalleled weapon that can send thousands of orcs into the sea to hell. If it weren't for the fact that the final control of the Nagas and Murlocs is in the hands of my master, I would even be willing to give them to your Majesty to command. Please don't shirk this responsibility. This is for the Alliance. Lang, who had thought it through, was extremely open-minded. As soon as Duque finished speaking, a commotion quickly spread out with the four as the center. There were murmurs of admiration around them. This was what it meant to serve the public, and what it meant to look at the overall situation. Which king didn't have their own plans for forming the alliance? Dai Lin was definitely very envious of Duque's fleet. In private, he had complained to his son more than once that Duque recklessly wasted God's resources. Now, he said, for the alliance. A fleet of over 100 warships was transferred just like that. What kind of internationalism was this? After all, if Dai Lin was sinister enough, he could completely wipe out Stormwind's hard-to-come-by assets. With Duque being so magnanimous, Dai Lin's small complaints had long since flown out of the atmosphere. Dai Lin raised the wine plate that the waiter had filled for him and said loudly, "Did everyone hear that? Lieutenant General Marcus is willing to transfer all the warships to me, Dai Lin Proudmoore, for the alliance." The aristocrats said in unison. Since His Excellency Marcus is willing to make such concessions for the alliance, then I, Dai Lin, cannot fall behind. I, Din, hereby swear in the name of Thoradin the Great's collateral descendants that I will not mistreat the fleet that His Excellency Marcus gave me. Even if Kurtira's first fleet is wiped out, I will not let His Excellency Marcus' fleet be wiped out. The uproar spread like ripples and quickly spread throughout the banquet hall. Everyone applauded. They praised Duque and Lang for their magnanimity. What the alliance feared the most was that the kings would be secretive and unwilling to send out their main force. In the end, Lothar was likely to become a lone commander. Now, it was clear that Duque had made a good start. With Duque taking the lead, presumably the other kings would be too embarrassed to send out their ugly second-line troops. Chapter 223. When Duque announced that he would be donating 1,000,000 Arather gold coins on behalf of Stormwind, the entire banquet hall was in an uproar. Perhaps one could say that Duque was putting on a show, but it was still a show. When Makarov brought his men to the plaza outside the banquet hall and opened the chest to show everyone the shiny gold coins, the entire hall was left with nothing but awe and admiration. Duque did not give the money to anyone else, but to the Archbishop of the Church of Holy Light, Alonso's Fail. A long time ago in the Dalajan, a Lordaeran missionary threw a copper coin into the fountain and made a wish. I hope that one day I can spread the way of the holy light to every commoner, and teach them the meaning of the three virtues. This missionary was the Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonso's Fail. His footsteps covered every city on the continent, and his name as the Saint of Mercy had long been recognized by the entire continent. It was no exaggeration to say that he was the synonym of justice and holiness in this era. Duque said sincerely, "I believe that the Archbishop will distribute the funds fairly." Every king was willing to believe in Alonso's character. All of a sudden, the losses caused by the invasion of the Horde did not seem to be too painful. What did 1,000,000 gold coins mean? Among the 7 kingdoms, this was already the annual income of a mid-tier kingdom. For example, a small mountainous kingdom like Alterac only had a few 100,000 gold coins in their treasury. Of course, this had to do with the fact that the king's territories were poor, while the Bara family was extremely rich. The only ones who could easily take out 1,000,000 gold coins were Kurtiras, who traveled all over the world as a merchant, the inhumane mage kingdom of Dalaran, and the Rotterdam kingdom, which had the most fertile and rich land. Now, Duque's act of sending money after the fleet was like adding fuel to the fire. All of a sudden, the pretentious souls of the kings were awakened. Kurtiras, 2,000,000. King Lin, who had just received the benefits, raised 2 fingers. The Dalajan speaker, the old man who read Tycoon and wrote Antonidas, smiled and raised 3 fingers. Since the small countries below were acting tough, the king of Lordaeran, who considered himself to be the #1 fighter in the world of acting tough, raised his palm. Hiss! After the nobles gasped, they naturally burst into thunderous applause. An astronomical figure of 11,000,000 gold coins. Just thinking about it made his whole body tremble. But if you thought about it, you would know that Tyrrhena's was very smart. It was because the Rotterdam kingdom would definitely send out the most troops. If nothing went wrong, he would be the one who would suffer the most losses. In fact, it was very likely that the money would end up in the hands of the Rotterdam kingdom. But it didn't matter, the effect had been achieved. Originally, during the meeting, they hadn't decided how many troops each clan would send. As the commander of the alliance, Lothar had to discuss these matters one by one. This was the public relations of the banquet. Lothar didn't expect Duque to put on such a good show, which greatly lightened his workload. Archbishop Alonso struck while the iron was hot. For the future of mankind, for the future of this world, it's a good thing that the countries have the money to contribute and send their troops, isn't it? Of course, as the leader of the alliance, I announced that the first batch of troops from the Rotterdam kingdom will be led by Duke Alexandros Mograine, and his deputy will be General Abendis. The first batch of troops will be 100,000. 100,000 troops. How bold was that? It was definitely the most exaggerated standing military force among the kingdoms that had yet to enter a full state of war. One had to know that Stormwind City, which originally had 20,000 to 30,000 regular troops, now had 50,000 elite troops. Of course, the war potential of the Rotterdam kingdom was far more than that. The other kings who couldn't afford it were embarrassed. King Salas of Stormguard said loudly, "The earthy highlands don't need any knights for the time being. Chief Commander Lothar, you will see the Highland Knights of the Torrential Fortress within a week. King Xian of Gilneas said in a low voice, you will see the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Infantry Regiments of Gilneas. At this time, King Eden of Alterac, who had always been experienced and tactful, couldn't keep his face any longer. The Eagle Knights of the Alterac royal family will be under your command within a week. Chief Commander Lothar. Knights and cavalry were two different concepts. Even though they were both riding horses, knights were much more superior than cavalry. Every knight had to start as a poor knight candidate. They were usually servants who followed official knights to learn horsemanship, combat, etiquette, and other knowledge. Then, they had to prepare a warhorse and a set of armor. Don't underestimate a set of armor. A qualified knight's armor, unless it was passed down from generation to generation, was not something that ordinary people could afford even if they worked hard for a lifetime. If it was before Duque's transmigration, it would be equivalent to preparing 1 million RMB. Note that this was only the price of the armor, not the horse. Not just any horse could be used as a warhorse. Ordinary horses could not possibly bear the weight of a few hundred kilograms of armor and human. It was not cheap for a warhorse to bear such a weight and charge at high speed. If converted to RMB, it would be more than 500,000 renminbi. Basically, at a glance, any standing horse that was less than 1.7 meters tall was not a warhorse. So, raising a knight regiment was equivalent to raising at least 5 infantry regiments. These knight regiments were the treasures of the various kings and were rarely seen. The Gilneas kingdom lacked horses, so they directly pulled out their main infantry regiment. When Antonidas told Lothar that there would be a group of 200 mages led by one of the 6 members of the Kirin Tor Council, Lothar was grinning from ear to ear. He gave Duke a thumbs up. Thank you, child. I see a holy light in you. You have a beautiful heart that shines brighter than gold. The next moment, when Alonso's wrinkled hand touched Duque's shoulder, Duque's entire body emitted waves of gentle platinum light. This was the effect of Duke inheriting the moral integrity of a certain mage god. Ah, child, I didn't expect that apart from your amazing talent in the path of mystery, you also have unparalleled talent in the path of holy light. If one day, you can't continue on the path of mystery, the Stratholme Cathedral's door will be open for you. Awkward. What an awkward situation. So, after inheriting Mediva's moral integrity, I can become a holy priest. Duque thought that as a modern transmigrator, even if he became a priest, he would only be a shadow priest. This feeling was really like a dog crying. Not only Duque, but the other nobles were also pointing at Duque. No one thought that Duque, who burned 100,000 orcs to death, had the heart of a saint. Chapter 224. Of course, Duque did not have high hopes of becoming a divine archpriest. There were as many bosses as there were stars in the sky. He did not know when he would die twice, and he would lose his integrity. Hence, Duke was very touched by Alonso's invitation, but he refused to accept it no matter what. At this time, King Dalin came up and patted Duque's shoulder. Forget it, Archbishop Alonso's. I think a good guy like Duque should not be a saint. The world needs him, and Dalin suddenly smirked. Duque suddenly shuddered. It was a bad feeling. Sure enough, Duque was shot in the next second. Actually, if Duque is willing to use his fleet as a betrothal gift, I am willing to betroth Jaina to him. Not just Dalin, even his brother-in-law, Drake, who had a black forehead, said, I'm told that you look mature, but you're actually only 15. My sister is only 12. Duque almost choked on his own saliva and ran to his corpse. Forget it. In the history, Jaina sold her father and caused the death of her father and countless rumored boyfriends. Even if I can resurrect, I can't handle it. Duque decisively shifted the blame. I'll pass. I don't want to piss off Prince Arthas. At this moment, the 12-year-old Jaina had already shown her potential as a beauty. Arthas, the unlucky childhood sweetheart, was head over heels for her. A little later, she would attract the heart of Kale, that's the Prince of Kuel Salis. Oh, if it's a fair competition, I won't say anything even if my son loses. Terenas walked over. Duque continued to change his target. Haha, I don't want to be the public enemy of the Daligen stars. That's strange. Isn't it natural for explorers of the mysterious path to seek a partner with the same magical talent? Archmage Antonidas came over to make up for it. Duque cried in his heart. You guys, why are you so obsessed? Do you think you're the aunties of an illegal matchmaking agency? Duque stuttered. At this moment, all of these old and sly fellows could see that Duque had an inexplicable resistance to the name Jaina. Dai Lin was magnanimous. He laughed and patted Duque's shoulder. It's all right. Perhaps you will change your mind after you see the jewel of Cultiras in my house. Terenas waved his hand. Kalia, come here. His father. A generous and gentle voice came, and the bones of the surrounding young nobles all softened. Kalia Menethil was the second in line to inherit the throne of Lordaeron. She was the elder sister of the famous Arthas in the future, and she had a good relationship with Arthas. It had to be said that Princess Kalia had inherited her mother, Queen Leanne's beauty. She had a quiet, oval face, extremely exquisite and noble features, and soft golden hair that cascaded down to her shoulders like a waterfall. When Kalia, who was wearing a white dress, walked gracefully in front of Duque, intentionally or unintentionally showing off her exquisite figure. Everyone around could not help but gasp in admiration. What a perfect beauty! She was only 15 years old. If she became an adult, how beautiful would she be? Lothar whispered in his loud voice, Damn, I almost want to marry again. This joke was met with a burst of friendly laughter. A faint blush appeared on Princess Kalia's face, but she still greeted him graciously, Good evening, Duke Marcus. Lothar, this bastard, actually tricked Duque. Hey, young man, the princess greeted you. Don't you feel embarrassed if you don't give her a greeting gift? For a moment, the surrounding nobles jeered. Gift. Anyway, everyone knew that Duque was a tycoon. Didn't the cunning Terenas want to more or less trick Duque? Kid, at least give me 10 pounds of pearls, right? Duque, it was actually poor. Although he did not care about money, there were hundreds of thousands of refugees, and he had come to Lordaeron to show off. He really did not have much money left. Because of the war, the nobles instantly tightened their purse strings. It was difficult to sell luxury goods for a high price now. Something like 10 pounds of gold pearls, Duque did not want to give it. Moreover, she was the princess of Lordaeron, the strongest of the 7 kingdoms. Would she care about this? Of all things, she could not lose face. Duque gently waved his mage cloak. He was just short of saying, Get out of my way, I'm going to show off. Then, Duque made his move. During the days of training in Karazhan, although Duque did not create an ice circuit that was comparable to the arcane fire magic circuit, but there was still a small circuit of ice magic. Duque pointed his finger, and the wine in the waiter's hand suddenly flew into the air. As Duque's left index finger moved nimbly, the wine suspended in the air actually started to spin. What kind of magical control was this? Duque's understanding and control of elemental magic was completely beyond the imagination of an archmage like Antonidas. The show continued, and a cold breath emerged from Duque's palm. Crystal-clear ice petals formed in front of everyone's eyes. An ice rose made of ice elements? Under the brilliant light, every single ice rose petal could be seen clearly, layer upon layer, forming a blooming rose. Not only that, but there was also a faint flame flowing in the cold flower path and petals, flickering. Just this dreamy appearance alone caused the ladies in the audience to exclaim. At this moment, Duque was possessed. He did not know why, but he remembered some classic scenes from movies. He did a perfect hand kiss, imprinted his perverted pig mouth on the back of her snow-white and soft hand, and then handed over the rose of ice and fire that was enough to kill the heart of almost any girl. Your Highness Princess Kalia, only the most beautiful rose can match the most beautiful you. I hope you like this little gift. With that, Duque retreated with great style. To be honest, Princess Kalia had seen all kinds of luxurious gifts, but she had never seen such a creative, high-end, and classy magic rose of ice and fire. Terenas turned his head slightly to look at his court archmage. The old archmage shook his head in shame. He was telling his king, I can't do such exquisite magical control. On the other side, the princess was completely drunk. Her aqua-blue eyes stopped moving, and in her field of vision, there was only this beautiful dreamy rose. The flickering flame in the rose had attracted all her attention. She did not even know that her face was blushing so beautifully. Chapter 225. Her Royal Highness even forgot to return the greeting. After a full 10 seconds, she seemed to have snapped out of it and raised her head. She lifted her skirt with her left hand and bowed gently. I'm sorry, I've been rude. Thank you, Duke Marcus. Your gift is so perfect that I was dazed. Beside her, a noble girl had already whispered, Oh my God, if someone proposed to me with such a rose, I'd probably be willing to marry him immediately. Her unrestrained voice made Princess Kalia blush all the way to her neck. She suddenly turned around and walked away. Sorry, I'm a little uncomfortable. I've been rude. The nobles who were left on the ground were all shocked. How is this uncomfortable? It's clearly the most dazzling pearl of the Rotterdam Kingdom, Her Royal Highness, is tempted? At this moment, all the big shots present felt a jolt in their hearts. The situation seemed to be a little subtle. No king was a fool. Everyone could tell that although Stormwind was defeated, it was still victorious. They could still maintain their vitality under such a great disparity between the enemy and their allies. Lothar was very outstanding, but his excellence was still within the scope of human imagination. Duque was different. Not only was he ridiculously young, he also lacked courage, wisdom, strategy, and strength. He fought the demon king Sargeras, set fire to the orcs, and saved 50,000 elites with an ice ship. If all of that was just limited to rumors, the establishment of the alliance after Duque came to the Rotterdam Kingdom was really seen by all the big shots. Everyone knew that without Duque's intelligence and deductions, the alliance would not have been established so quickly. Everyone knew that without Duque, the kings would not have made a promise so easily just now. Perhaps without Duque, the alliance would still be established, and the troops would still be sent. However, with Duque, the process would be accelerated by who knew how many times. Which one was the most anxious now? Of course, it was Stormwind who had lost their territory. Without Duque's operation, Stormwind would only be left with a group of refugees and defeated generals. Even if the refugees survived, they would only be absorbed by the countries in the northern continent. They would become expendable in the war. The destruction of Stormwind was equivalent to a disguised war bonus for the other countries. Stormwind, on the other hand, would only be an empty shell. It would be controlled by the various countries. How could it be as free as Lothar was now? Even if the other 7 countries all retreated, Lothar still had 50,000 elite soldiers to fight one last time. This was the confidence of one's family. In the eyes of other kings, Stormwind, who had lost his territory, was full of treasures. And Duque was obviously a gem among them. King Tarina stroked his long beard. He suddenly felt that Duque and Kalia's union was not a bad choice. King Tarina said, Duke Marcus, the royal family of Lordaeron is having a small banquet tomorrow night. Are you free? Facing the king of Lordaeron's gaze, Duque shivered slightly. Did I act too tough just now? Sorry, I have to deal with more than 800 documents every day. I've accumulated a lot these days. Duque seemed to be very busy. Who knew that Tarina's eyes suddenly lit up? Not only him, but the other kings also stared at Duque like hungry wolves. Duque knew that he had misspoken again. Stormwind is really lucky. My 12 cabinet ministers might not even be able to deal with 800 documents in a month. Tarina seemed to have found another reason to rope in Duque. Duque's mind was filled with curses. In terms of magic and strategy, he was starting to mature. But whether it was in his previous life or this life, his political sensitivity was zero. Duque decided to play dumb. After some small talk, Duque was dragged away by Lang. On a balcony, the door was closed, blocking out the noise of the banquet. At this moment, the king, who had always been wise most of the time, seemed a little lonely. Duque, actually, I want to say, I'm very grateful to you. Without your arrangements, I would have died a long time ago. Most of the soldiers and civilians of Stormwind also died in the city. I wouldn't have formed an alliance today. Your Majesty, wait, let me finish? You are a very talented person. To be honest, I always thought that I could give you everything you want, but it turns out that I was wrong. Stormwind is too weak. If you think that joining another kingdom is a better choice, I will give you my blessings. Wait, Your Majesty! Wait, are you mistaken about something? I've never thought of leaving the Stormwind Kingdom. Duke, who felt that something was amiss, quickly interrupted Ryan. But that was an invitation from the strongest nation in the sea, Courtiers, and the strongest nation, Lordaeron? In Lang's eyes, Stormwind was now a broken ship. What kind of joke is this? I just boarded the best ship, and now the captain is asking me to jump ship? Only Duque knew that after a period of time, the 7 human kingdoms, except for Stormwind, were all destroyed or crippled. Duque couldn't calm down at all. He knelt on one knee. Although I wasn't born in Stormwind, I like Stormwind. Here, there is Your Majesty who trusts me, and there is a commander who is willing to cooperate with me. Here I can use my strengths. Your Majesty, if you still don't believe me, you should at least believe in your deceased good friend, Medivh. Medivh! Suddenly hearing his good friend's name, Lang was in a daze. You can see Karazhan as a legacy, or you can see it as a deal. Medivh gave me Karazhan, gave me a direct passage to the supreme throne in the mysterious world. As the price, I am willing, and I am also obliged to protect Stormwind. So, Your Majesty, don't think too much. Even if I marry a noble lady, there will only be one more Duchess of Karazhan, and not one more prince of some kingdom. Hearing this, Lang was finally relieved. At this time, Lothar came over with Archbishop Fail. Lothar quietly opened the glass lattice door of the balcony, and Duque went to open it. Archbishop Alonsos has something to say to us. Alonsos walked over and smiled. I won't take up too much of your time, but I think what I'm doing will be of great help to you and the entire alliance. First of all, Stormwind is righteous. The Church of Holy Light will not only provide support to the alliance, but after defeating the orcs, the Church will also start collecting donations from the believers to support the reconstruction of Stormwind. This sentence carried a lot of weight. Lang's Stormwind had almost lost its source of funds, and every bit of support was precious. Thank you, Father. Lang bowed slightly. The second thing, and the most important thing, is that I found a new way to use the Holy Light. It's an important way to use it. Chapter 226. It's here. It's here. It's really here. When Archbishop Fao said that, Duque's heart almost jumped out of his chest. He had had enough of the ferocious people in the tribe. Any one of them would make him have no choice but to let Lothar go. Think about this terrible dialogue. I have General Pan. Oh, it's you, Hellscream. I let Lothar go. I have the sword Sage Samuro. I still let Lothar go. I have the Hammer of Destruction. I can only let Lothar go. What the hell is that? It's embarrassing just thinking about it. Do you think there's no one in the Grand Alliance? Duque really wanted to find a chance to make use of the flexibility of the mages to bully the tribal chiefs. However, Duque was clear that the demigod warlock ghoul, Dan in the tribe had definitely awakened. Not only ghoul, Dan, but the remaining warlocks were all strong enemies. Under the confrontation between the two armies, Duque had almost no chance to get past the warlocks and directly beat up the chiefs. But it was completely different now. The glorious name of Alonso's FAO was not remembered by the majority of players before Duque's transmigration because of his holiness, but because he was the mentor of the first 5 paladins. Among the 5 gold saints, among the 5 paladins, 4 of them were monsters that were so fierce that they did not seem human. In history, except for a guy who was shoved in by Lothar to make up the numbers, the 4 of them had left their names in history. It was a little exciting to be able to witness the birth of the first paladins. Duque, Lang, and Andoin all pricked up their ears. Do you remember the conversation we had after you came to the Rotterdam? FAO paced in front of them. I remember. It was about the destruction of the Northshire Abbey. At this point, FAO's gaze dimmed. I have to admit I was very depressed. If I could find a way for the monks to survive this sudden outbreak of war, I would not have been able to do so. Perhaps the bearers of holy light would not have suffered such a heavy loss. Noxus nodded and sighed. Indeed, the path of holy light of the priests does not allow them to wear any equipment above leather armor. Thin cloth clothes do not give them enough protection at all. In the face of the orcs' great strength, we are still weak even with our full armor, let alone the priests who have almost no armor at all. Fail smiled, a genuinely happy smile. When I was thinking hard about these problems, an idea suddenly appeared in my mind, as if the holy light had enlightened me. Have you found a way? Lothar asked. That's right. Fail clapped his hands and said, I will establish a new branch of the church, the Holy Knights. Not only did they have devout faith, but they also practiced a lot of battle techniques. Not only did they receive combat training, but they also received training in prayer and healing. These brave warriors will have both military and spiritual abilities, especially the ability to use the power of the holy light to bless themselves and others. Can you really do it? Noxus was full of doubts. He didn't think that a priest who could only heal soldiers could charge to the front line to kill the enemy. Duque almost wanted to remind Lothar that it was the two he saw in the palace that day. But Duque held back. Fail smiled and made a gesture of blessing. Lothar and the other two saw a wave of holy power suddenly converge from Fail's body, whose whole body was glowing. It gathered above Fail's head and formed a holy seal shining with red light. That holy seal was obviously full of power and strange power, but the three of them felt a sense of peace and tranquility at the same time. An indescribable sense of happiness reverberated in their bodies. Is this the power of the Holy Knights? Lang muttered to himself. Fail smiled. Duque impatiently asked, Have you found suitable candidates? Actually, I have found 4. You can meet them tomorrow morning. But if you have more suitable candidates, you can also provide them to me. I want to personally enlighten them with the holy power in their bodies in the holy city of Stratholme within a week. At this moment, Duque was excited. This wasn't some fake great master randomly blessing a female benefactor's body. This was the enlightenment of the one and only holy light grand teacher in the world of Azeroth. Perhaps the 4 legendary guys were already very powerful before they became holy knights, but before they were enlightened, there was a limit to how powerful they could be. After enlightenment, their strength would simply break through the sky. Thinking back to history, Wuther dared to charge against thousands of orcs with just 12 holy knights. Just the thought of that scene made his blood boil. Easily seeing the eagerness on Duque's face, Lang also smiled. Duque, are you very optimistic about Father Fail's plan? Yes. Absolutely right. That's great. Duque was not stingy with his praise. I think this is definitely an epic-making new force. Not only will I let my follower Reginald Windsor come to receive enlightenment, I strongly recommend that Duke for Dragon come as well. Bolvar? Lang was a little puzzled. Your Majesty, don't you think it's very suitable? Duke for Dragon has an extremely devout faith, a fair heart, and superb combat skills. Of course, in Duque's heart, Bolvar was much worse than Anduin at this moment. He would still be sending himself to death if he met the chief of a large clan. After hearing Duque's words, both Lang and Anduin felt that it was a good idea. Anduin asked, Who will watch over the South Shore army if Bolvar comes over too? Lang smiled. Of course it's me, the general of the alliance. After saying that, Lang gently punched Lothar's chest. The unparalleled trust between a king and a subject was completely revealed. Thank you for your hard work, Your Majesty. Lang waved his hand. Just get rid of the orcs as soon as possible and take back our Stormwind city. On the morning of the 13th of October, the whole city was in an uproar over the establishment of the alliance. Lothar and Duque arrived at the main courtyard of the Rotterdam Cathedral. They had already had breakfast and were waiting for the arrival of Archbishop Fail. At the appointed time, the Archbishop appeared and walked over calmly. Thank you very much for accommodating an old man like me despite your busy schedule. He turned around and waved his hand, and 4 men appeared from the end of a nearby corridor. They walked towards Fail in high spirits. Duke's eyes lit up all of a sudden. 4 burly men, each of them wearing shiny armor. Every part of the armor, the shield in their hands, and the top of their helmets had the emblem of the Church of Light. All of them were carrying a sword, and from the way they walked, Duke could tell that they were at least skilled swordsmen. The only problem was that the armor and weapons were brand new. Not to mention the marks of intense battle or repair, there wasn't even a stain on them. Chapter 227. If he didn't guess wrongly, there might still be some dishes to order now. No, that should not include Uther and Tyrion for din. When the orc slaves wreaked havoc in Rotterdam a few days ago, they had already started killing. However, at that time, they were using hammers, and now they were using swords to pretend to be gentle. Come to think of it, they were meeting the commander-in-chief of the coalition army now, not going into battle to kill the enemy. Why would they use the king's hammer? Oh, why would they use the king's hammer? Anyway, in order to give the commander-in-chief a good first impression, they naturally had to look good. Few people would bring their own background music when they appeared, and Uther was clearly one of them. He was handsome and elegant, coupled with his burly figure and sunny appearance, as well as the faint glow of holy light wrapped around his body. If one took a closer look, they would feel as if they were listening to the organ playing hymns in a church, and the faint but melodious singing of the holy children echoing in their ears, giving them a feeling that even their souls had been sublimated. Please allow me to introduce Uther, Sidon Dathan, Tyrion for din, and Turayan. Fail pointed at them and smiled like a proud father who was promoting his sons to the parents of the women at a blind date. They will be very important members of the Silver Hand Knights that I am about to form. Fail paused for a moment, and then introduced Lothar and Duke to the 4 paladin-in-waiting. This is Sir Anduin Lothar, the general of Stormwind City and the commander-in-chief of the Alliance. And this young mage is his colleague, Duke Marcus, the great hero who killed the demon king Sargeras and burned hundreds of thousands of orcs. Fail smiled. Now, it's time for you young people. The 6 of you have a good chat alone. The archbishop nodded to everyone and left the courtyard. Duke had never thought that he would one day be worshipped and sought after by those famous and powerful people of later generations. However, thinking about it, Duke had long been famous. In fact, Lang had also intentionally or unintentionally promoted Duke's reputation through MI7. Compared to Lothar's series of inconspicuous achievements, Duke's deeds as a young hero were more legendary. The more desperate the situation was, the more people hoped to see a hero, a role model, a leader who could lead them forward. Duke did not disappoint. Therefore, Duke's reputation also rose. You couldn't kill Sargeras back then? I'm sorry, but nobody knows how to destroy the fallen Titan's soul. Just how powerful are demons? When I have time, I can teleport you to Karazhan. It's attacked by demons once a week on average. Lothar and Duke were surrounded by the candidates. Turalian, the shortest of the group, seemed to shrink back. Others, like Uther and Tyrion, were relaxed and at ease. Compared to Duke, who was familiar with the future, Noxus was still doubtful. He didn't know what this new class would bring to the Alliance's army. When Lothar was thinking about how to give them hope without dampening their enthusiasm, as well as how to make arrangements for them, Uther broke the silence. Dear Commander, the Archbishop has told us the direction to go. We are also very clear that we are about to face an extremely cruel battle. We will listen to all your orders, and we will fight for the people and die for the people. You can order us whenever you feel it is necessary. Uther was a tall man with a chiseled face, and his expression was always full of determination. There was a faint golden glow in his sea-blue eyes. It was a gaze that was almost holy. From his words and body language, Duke and Anduin could feel Uther's devotion to the holy light. He was more fanatical and determined, but lacked the passion and delicacy of Archbishop Fail. Sion Dathran, who was the tallest and was labeled as 2.03 meters by Duke's system, had an even thicker warrior's aura. He waved his fists forcefully. We don't ask how many enemies there are, we only ask where they are. We will completely defeat those orcs and drive these dirty and cruel fellows back to their planet. Tyrion Fordring was equally firm in his faith, but he was not as fanatical as Uther. He chatted with everyone amiably. The last one was Turallion. The short paladin candidate did not actively participate in the discussion of faith. Instead, he talked about the war and the state of affairs. For example, he said, if the Horde doesn't have superior shipbuilding skills that can shorten the time of building a ship to a few months, then it's very likely that the orcs will crush our defense line with their sheer numbers. The pleasant conversation made time pass quickly. It was almost noon, and Lothar, the commander of the alliance, had to attend a luncheon. After the 4 paladin candidates bid farewell, Lothar chatted with Duque as they walked. What do you think of them? Uther, Saidan, and Tyrion are all sharp knives against the Horde. Tyrion is more rational, and his faith may not be strong enough. But he is definitely a talented commander. I'm not targeting their personalities. Lothar frowned and sighed. It's not that I doubt my old friend Alonso's, but I really doubt how useful they are. Why is that? Duque raised his eyebrows. Lothar seemed to be thinking about how to phrase his words, even though he did not think that Duque was the kind of person who would blabber. After a while, he said, there is too little time. They seriously lack the time to prepare. Do you remember what you said? When Stormguard blocks the northern path of the Solder Bridge, then it is estimated that the tribe will arrive in the northern continent within a month or even less. So what? Didn't you see their performance of killing the orcs in the palace a while ago? Perhaps they are very powerful warriors, but none of them have experienced war as so-called paladins. Of course, I do not doubt their combat ability. But we are not short of warriors. This was what troubled me the most. I had to command a group of professionals who had never appeared in this world before, rookies who had never experienced the test of battle before. Fail wants them to play a role as the core. This is the core. Do you want me to appoint a few rookies as the deputy commander of the alliance? Duque smacked his lips. Oh, that is indeed the case in history. I do not know why the kings would agree to appoint Tyrion, who has no combat experience and is not a prince or a duke, as the deputy commander of the alliance. When they arrived at the luncheon, King Tyrinus's words made Duker feel like he was on the outside and on the inside. Duke Marcus, the 7 kings have unanimously elected you as the deputy commander of the alliance. Chapter 228. Duque choked on the wine he had just drunk, which amused Tyrinus and Anduin. Cough, 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 why me? Don't tell me you're not going to choose the holy knight that Archbishop Fao recommended? Duke whispered his doubts. At the long table, Tyrinus elegantly put down the wine plate in his hand. That's also a choice. Tyrinus looked at Anduin, and Anduin immediately gave him a knowing look. Anduin continued, I think it is similar to me being elected as the commander of the alliance. If it were not for you, Duque, perhaps the kings of the 7 kingdoms would choose a paladin recommended by Archbishop Fao, who is more neutral. King Tyrinus continued, the dwarves only need support. After receiving sufficient support, the dwarves will not have any mobility in a short period of time. But the kings of the 7 kingdoms are different. They have to consider who is more reliable to hand over their troops to. Not to mention that the 7 kingdoms have handed over their elite troops this time. We trust Sir Lothar, but there are times when we need to divide our forces. In fact, it is not easy to find a candidate who is strategic, decisive, and fair enough to be accepted by the kingdoms. Anduin continued, I understand that the Archbishop wants the paladins to perform a miracle, but why should we take an unnecessary risk when there is a better and safer choice? Tyrinus chuckled, his white hair swaying in the wind. At this moment, he looked a little cute in Duque's eyes. There is a ready-made, publicly recognized, fair, and neutral candidate with an impressive battle record. Why not choose a completely unknown newbie? That is the greatest absurdity. Duque was a little embarrassed, and he finally felt that he had changed history. Yes, he had forgotten that he was the most suitable one. In history, Lothar almost went to the northern continent alone. Being born in Stormwind City, he naturally could not affect the interests of the 5 kingdoms of the northern continent, Kakur Tiras. It was the same for Duque. The root of Duque's interests was in the southern continent, and Duque's series of successes, such as the command of the fleet, had successfully conquered the various kings, which was why Duque had risen to power. Turayan, who had ascended to the top in a single bound, also ascended to the top in the following discussion with Lothar. Unfortunately, halfway through his ascension, Turayan continued to be Lothar's assistant. However, he was only an adjutant in the army, not the deputy commander of the alliance, let alone independent military power. In the eyes of King Menethil and Lothar, Bishop Fao wouldn't be dissatisfied with such a high position even though they hadn't seen the so-called Holy Night yet. This was all for the sake of the Archbishop. After all, a paladin was a combat profession, not some strategist college or military academy. I'm sorry, Turalian. Duque smiled bitterly in his heart. After that, they talked a lot during the lunch. Turinas talked about forming the Silver Hand Knights with the paladins as the core. This was not a short-term matter. First, it would take at least a month to recruit people from Rotterdam and even the entire northern continent. Then they would train, reorganize, and carry out their beliefs. All of these would add up to at least 3 months to form a combat force. Meanwhile, the Horde's attack across the sea was imminent. After the lunch, during the afternoon military meeting, the hastily built grassroots troop gathered together. The main military ranks of the people present were Commander-in-Chief Andoin, Deputy Commander-in-Chief Duque, Admiral Del Lin, Vice Admiral Mograine, and Rear Admiral Abendis. Of course, the main reason was that most of the kings had rushed back to their countries to mobilize their troops, and the King of Rotterdam was not good at military affairs. The kings also had a private agreement to prohibit Turinas from commanding the army. Del Lin was a king, but he played the role of admiral in the alliance's navy well, showing his respect for Lothar. The current situation is that my fast reconnaissance ship discovered that the Horde has built a large number of small and medium-sized transport ships, but not a single ship that is comparable to our destroyer. A large-scale sea crossing without any cover? Lothar's head hurt. This is not common sense. That's common sense. Duque calmly reminded. If it were a normal human, it would be impossible for them to climb over the cliffs on the east and north side of Stormwind City to attack the 2 low walls of Stormwind City. In fact, the Horde did it, and Stormwind City fell because of it. No one refuted Duque. Lothar looked up. Who has a more reasonable inference? Duque glanced at Admiral Del Lin and pointed to South Shore in the middle of the huge map. If I don't have good shipbuilding skills, or enough time to build a large number of battleships to resist the enemy, but I have enough troops, I will use a large number of transport ships to drown the enemy. Del Lin looked at Duque unhappily. I want to remind you, Deputy Commander-in-Chief, that the first fleet of courtiers has arrived at the dock of South Shore, and the second and third fleets will arrive in 5 days. The storm fleet that Your Excellency passed the command to me is also waiting for orders in South Shore. What he meant was not to underestimate the dominance of courtiers in the field of naval warfare. Very good confidence, Admiral. May I ask how many battleships the 4 fleets have in total? 12 reconnaissance ships, 312 destroyers, 89 cruisers, and 18 large battleships. Admiral Del Lin puffed out his chest proudly. If the Horde comes with these moving target ships, the courtiers' navy can destroy them all on the sea. Very good number. But what if the Horde comes with more than 10,000 transport ships? 20,000? 30,000? What if the number of enemy ships is far more than the total number of cannons of your army? Duque continued to ask. Dellin's expression finally changed. This is not possible, right? Duque pulled out a 3D video. It was a clip of the Horde's laborers sacrificing themselves to attack Stormwind City. Do you see? These are the Horde's laborers. These laborers have no value in the eyes of the orcs, and they will be used as cannon fodder. There are more than 500,000 known Horde warriors, and this does not include these laborers. If I hold this card, I'll build 20,000 transport ships. The first 5,000 will be the lowest number of laborers to maintain the ship's voyage. I'll even use the ships to exhaust the humans' ammunition. When your ship's cannons are about to explode, my official army will arrive. The generals were all numb. Lothar took a deep breath. What good idea do you have? Duque smiled. Please allow me to introduce the South Shore Defense Line. Chapter 229. Duque was very busy. After introducing the South Shore Defense Line, originally, he would have continued with the military discussion. In his imagination, in the next week, all the big shots would be discussing the same thing: which path the horde would most likely come from, where they might attack, and how to quickly mobilize the Alliance's army to that area. It was autumn harvest time, and not every country was called Lordaeron. Not every country had enough food reserves to feed the entire country for a year. For Gilnis, Alterac, and a few other countries, they had to at least block the damned horde outside before their important hinterland and crops were trampled. But Duque was invited away. As one of the only 2 Breaking Dawn wizards in the world, Antonidas was a very special existence in the Alliance. He hoped that Duque could participate in an exchange with the Kirin Tor Council. The Kirin Tor Council was fundamentally different from the Tirisfal Council that Sargeras had destroyed. The Kirin Tor Council only governed the Dalajan Kingdom, while the Tirisfal Council was a world organization that mainly fought against demons and prevented the abuse of magic. Duque couldn't refuse his request. "I've already asked the Chief Commander for leave for you. Although I'm a little sorry, the Kirin Tor Council hopes to meet you in the Dalajan. I'm sure you're familiar with teleportation portals?" Antonidas, who had a long white beard that almost reached his belly, chuckled at Duque. Duque nodded. Then, arcane energy flowed out of Antonidas' hands. Spatial lock, arcane energy harmonization, spatial scan, a series of small enchantments dazzled Duque. When he counted to 3, Duque stopped counting. Anyway, the system genie had already recorded it for him. He would study it slowly when he had the time. When he stepped into the purplish-red portal that seemed to be breathing and contained a strange arcane wave, Duque immediately felt the difference in magic between him and Antonidas. With the help of the system, Duque was already very strong. In terms of quality, there was a huge gap between them and even Morningstar wizards, let alone Breaking Dawn wizards. Antonidas had only used the strength of a Morningstar to open the portal. Duque also knew how to teleport. However, when he was traversing through space, Duque was more like playing dodgeball. He carefully avoided one unstable space after another during the high-speed teleportation. He would rather take a long detour than take the risk of passing through any unstable area. Antonidas, on the other hand, was different. Apart from those terrifying black hole-level spaces, all the spatial rifts and space obstacles were driven away by his magic power. For example, when Duque encountered a mountain, he would circle around the foot of the mountain, while Antonidas would directly open a tunnel in the mountain. Well, it was the kind that could be completed in an instant. How could they compete? When it came to the use of spatial magic, this revered old wizard was definitely the most reliable after the death of Medivh. Duque had also teleported himself to the Dalajan. His magic was strong enough for this task, but when Duque successfully crossed this daunting distance, Duque would probably vomit and have diarrhea for a while before he could recover. Antonidas's teleportation was as peaceful as Duque's ride in the elevator before he transmigrated. Personally visiting the Dalajan was a magical feeling. If there was any place in the human kingdom that could be called a miracle, it would be the Dalajan. Located south of Lake Lordaeron, this wondrous city was a combination of wisdom, power, grandeur, beauty, art, and mystery. It was the most dazzling pearl in the entire continent. Even though the Lordaeron kingdom on the northern shore of Lake Lordaeron was equally beautiful, compared to the Dalajan, it still lacked the extraordinary sense of miracle. In the past, almost all human mages in the world studied the arcane spells they learned from the high elves in this city. The mysterious and elegant white towers that spread throughout the city symbolized the wisdom, ambition, status, and power of the mages. Antonidas had invited Duque here when the enemy was right in front of him. Naturally, there was no way he could give Duque any time to sightsee. Duque was directly invited to the magic hall where the Kirin Tor Assembly was located. The Kirin Tor Assembly Hall was a very magical space. Strictly speaking, this place did not belong to the Dalajan city. In a sense, this was already the airspace. If his vision and the system elf's altimeter were not deceiving Duque, This place was 1,024 meters above the Dalian city. The low clouds were at his feet. Looking ahead, it was already a dark sky with twinkling stars. It was as if a hook had been placed here, firmly hooking the sky and hanging in the air. Only the bright lights of the Dalian city on the ground allowed Duque to barely see that this place was still a part of the world of Azeroth. Not only did he have the high-altitude view like he was sitting on an airplane, but the space at the top of his field of vision also had slight changes. The space-time fragments that were swept up by the space storm caused the scenery in the sky to change strangely. Sometimes it was the darkness that made people sleepy, or maybe it was the brightness of the rising sun. This was obviously not a scenery that could be seen normally. The 6 council members stood on a huge metal ring that was even higher than Duque. If Duque wanted to talk to them, he had to raise his head, and each of them stood at a 60-degree angle. This made Duque rather unhappy. But what made him even more unhappy was the attire of the council members. Perhaps it was to make the person who was being questioned feel a sense of awe. To outsiders, they could only see a purple headscarf embroidered with the symbol of the Dalian kingdom and a huge cloak that covered their entire body. Everything else, such as their body shape, face, and even gender, were concealed by their clothes and magic. What the hell is this? Are they inviting me to be judged? Duque was furious. Antonidas keenly sensed Duque's anger, and he apologized. I'm sorry, the Kirin Tor counselors are all selected in secret. Because we have a more democratic national system, the votes of the counselors on key matters will affect the policies of the entire country. So in order to avoid being bribed, threatened, or any other kind of pressure, other than me as the chairman, they all use this method to meet outsiders. What angered Duque the most was not this, but the look in their eyes. In their eyes, there was no such thing as a deputy chief of the alliance, only a lowly sky mage. Enough! Duque shouted, causing the 6 counselors to tremble. I am not a Dalian mage, and I am not a prisoner here to be judged. Raise my chair. Take off your masks. It is basic etiquette to show your true face. If you can't even do this, I will return now. The Alliance will not be unable to defeat the Horde without you, Dalian. Chapter 230. Duque's words were very serious, and several counselors immediately retracted their contemptuous gazes. But this was not enough. Please understand, our secret principle, Duque sneered mercilessly, expressing his disdain for this pretentious game of shadow. Duque was very clear about the thoughts of these counselors. Why did the Kirin Tor Council invite him here? To put it nicely, it was to exchange information. Of course, this was the main reason, but there were also many secondary reasons. For example, after entering the Alliance, would Pharaoh be treated the same as a normal knight? Perhaps they felt that directly pressuring Noxus, who was originally a warrior, was a little too obvious, and the effect might not be good. So they first looked for him, who was younger and more familiar with the magical domain. Also, there was another important reason, Karazhan. As the Dalian that claimed to be the only holy land of mages for thousands of years, they were very unhappy that there was a Karazhan in the south of the continent that could compete with them. After all, this shook the Dalian's only transcendent position. However, Medivh was so arrogant that the Dalian could not do anything to Medivh. Not being able to touch Medivh did not mean that the Kirin Tor Council could not do anything. That was why the Violet Isle was born. This was a secret organization established by the Kirin Tor Council to investigate Medivh and monitor his activities. It was a secret branch of the Kirin Tor Council that ruled the Dalian. Their mission was to monitor Karazhan and its master, Medivh, who were filled with spatial cracks. To put it nicely, it was to prevent things from getting out of control. To put it bluntly, once Medivh fell, they would be the first to reap the benefits. In fact, even Khadgar was originally a spy sent by the Kirin Tor to Medivh's side. However, Medivh generously accepted Khadgar as a disciple. In the original history, not only did Khadgar righteously get rid of Medivh, who was possessed by Sargeras, but he also took good care of his mother's family and helped the Violet Eye transport Medivh's treasures and most precious books back to the Dalian. It sounded like as a disciple, Khadgar inherited his master's legacy and had the right to do with it. right? In theory, this was true. But considering that Lang collected magic books for his good friend, Medivh, and also in order to create a new holy land of magic in the south, Khadgar's actions were very unkind. Originally, Khadgar was definitely a saint to the Alliance, but to the Stormwind Kingdom, who had spent a lot of effort to build Karazhan and provided a large number of magic books, Khadgar was definitely a bastard who helped others. But in that time and space, Lang also died, and later on, Noxus also died. The young King Varian had no one to complain to, and Stormwind also lost control of Karazhan. But now Karazhan was in Duke's hands. The Dalagens still wanted to get their hands on it? Don't even think about it. This was why Duke was so unyielding. Duke ignored Antonida's explanation and said sternly, "Sorry, I'm a stubborn person. I also have a mysterious talent that allows me to see through appearances. For example, when I was still a magic apprentice, I directly discovered that Medivh was possessed by Sargeras. So, your so-called secrets are meaningless in front of me." As soon as he said this, the entire Kirin Tor parliament fell silent. Every counselor's eyes were filled with disbelief. As a transmigrator with the system elf, Duke easily locked onto his first target. It was in existence with the same magic circuit as him. Although the magic covered up a lot of the aura, those eyes could definitely help Duke analyze it with one look. He stared straight at the figure on the left. Hiding in the shadows will bring shame to the name of the Sunstrider, Prince Kael, that's. Duke immediately heard a surprised gasp from under the man's mask, but it quickly turned into a chuckle. "You're right, young Duke Marcus," the mage replied. "Personally, I also think that talking to a dark figure is too rude for the Alliance's deputy chief commander." With a quick gesture and a low incantation, the disguise on the elf prince disappeared, revealing the gorgeous violet and gold robe he was wearing. As a high elf, Kael, that's had a full 100 points in terms of appearance. He had long, silky blonde hair that could sell shampoo advertisements. That head of golden hair that felt more luxurious than gold silk slid past her shoulders, matched with that incomparably delicate all-shaped face and the incomparably sexy red lips in the eyes of a silly girl. Perhaps a wink was enough to make all the girls who followed Korean dramas before Duque would be willing to jump into a river for him. But Duque hated him. Men hated men who were more handsome than themselves. Don't ask why. This expression had a hint of vigilance towards Duque's slight disgust, but his good upbringing allowed him to maintain his elegance. "Is this better?" "Much better, thank you," Duque said. He turned to look at the counselor on his right. "What about the others? Do you want me to continue? Lord Krasus? Or Lurkel, Fit, who is right behind me?" As a red dragon, Krasus and Kel, Fizad, who had a unique smell of the undead, were easier to distinguish than a lighthouse in the dark with the help of the system elf. 4 of the 6 counselors had revealed themselves, and the remaining 2 had no reason to hide. The counselors of the Kirin Tor Tower all thought so, and they all removed their concealment methods. They didn't know that Duque didn't know the remaining 2 counselors at all. Duque wasn't in the Dalagen, so who would know who the 2 counselors that weren't even recorded in history books were? In fact, he wouldn't even know if he saw them. After being slapped in the face by Duque, Antonidas waved his hand, and the surrounding landscape immediately changed. It became a rectangular table that was commonly seen among nobles. "Please sit." Antonidas took the lead and sat on an invisible chair. The 6 counselors sat on one side, and Duque sat on the other. Since their positions were equal, Duque didn't make things difficult for them. He exchanged information about the tribe with the Dalagen as equals. "You said that the orc planet is Draenor? Through the dark portal, they connect the 2 worlds? That's terrible. If there's a chance, we must destroy the dark portal." What? The warlocks of the tribe all use the forbidden power of the demons. They can absorb human life, and they can also resurrect people and turn them into immortals. This is really annoying news. We will study how to deal with it. After a series of exchanges, Duque was sent away by Antonidas. Chapter 231. After Duque left, the 6 counselors returned to their original 6-man council. "What do you think?" The authenticity of the information is quite high, and it matches what we have gathered. It is obvious that Duke Marcus wants to cooperate with us sincerely. The problem is that he is very wary of us Dalajan, and even slightly hostile. Maybe he knows Khadgar's identity. Sigh, put the matter of Karazhan aside for later. Right now, the group of orcs who are trying to destroy the entire human race and all other intelligent life on the planet is the biggest problem. I suggest that we form an additional group of mages to participate in the attack on the Horde. This requires an additional counselor to lead. Agreed. Agreed. 3 voices said at the same time, agreed. That means we have a unanimous vote. All right, who's going? Sorry, my identity is a little sensitive, and my father has not approved it yet. Kale, that was a little embarrassed. It's okay, I'll go. The one who spoke was Karasis. Together with Kel, Thazad, these 2 high-ranked mages with strange fates officially participated in the second battle of the Dark Portal. After Duque returned to Lordaeron, he received news that the Dalajan was willing to send an additional group of mages to help, and it was an additional Kirin Tor leading the team. There were no additional requests. Lothar gave Duque a big bear hug on the spot, almost strangling Duque to death. I actually did nothing. Duque felt wronged. No, you making a trip there is the greatest contribution to the Alliance. You don't have to say anything, I know. Lothar was so touched that tears were about to come out. He had gone to Dalaran to threaten them. Just one round of acting tough had such an effect. Duke was speechless at the thought of it. Thinking of the good cards that the Horde would have next, Duque felt that his side was not good enough. Duque had originally wanted to watch the first-generation paladin transform into a magical uncle, burst. But a piece of news made Duque's good mood disappear. Vara sent a message. The fishman was unstable. At that moment, Duque really felt as if he had just woken up. To be honest, the Murloc army had always been Duque's private territory. I don't care about the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th battles. I don't care if the Calamity army runs rampant on the continent or if Arthas kills his father and teacher to destroy the entire continent. If I really can't handle it, I'll hide in the middle of the sea and become an island master, shouting, I'm going to be the pirate king. At least I won't have to turn into a ghoul. How could he say that the mermen were unstable? Duque rested for a while, and told Anduin that the merfolk in South Shore Town were a little troublesome before teleporting away. Originally, South Shore did not have a teleportation point. However, as the inheritor of Astral Mage Mediv and a die-hard fan of Blitzkrieg, before leaving South Shore, Duque had drawn a huge teleportation portal in his temporary wooden house. Right in front of Anduin and Dylin, Duque raised his hand, and countless azure runes floated out of Duque's hand and danced in the air, forming ribbons of runes that spun endlessly. The huge magic formation with a diameter of more than 3 meters spread out under Duque's feet, and everyone was dazzled by it. In the next moment, Duque's figure seemed to have been sucked into a small black hole and disappeared from the lawn of the palace. Dylin shrugged. Being a mage is really convenient. Once my baby Jaina has mastered it, I'll ask her to play with me. Lothar rolled his eyes. Did you have dinner last night? Of course. Why do you ask? I want to tell you that teleportation below the Breaking Dawn mage level is terrible. There's more than a 30% chance of dying halfway. Even if you succeed, it's very likely that you'll vomit everything you ate yesterday. Duque appeared in South Shore. The dazzling magical radiance alarmed many guards, and Makarov's son even ran over to greet him after waking up. Duque sighed slightly. When he gained more power, he immediately realized that his foundation was weak. If he sent a few people out, there would be no one to order him around. Van Cleef went to the Western Wilderness, Windsor went to Stratholme to be baptized, Makarov and Vanessa were still in Lordaeron, Itana, whose father was a clerk, was ordered around by Duque as an internal affairs officer, and Darnielle was still playing reconnaissance on the other side of the sea. Duke pondered if he should find an opportunity to recruit 2 more underlings to help him. At this time, the commander of the Griffin Legion, General Tom Seamus, rushed over with his guards. It's Duke Marcus. Your Naga said that you're rushing back, and they want to go ashore. Lang had yet to return to South Shore, and Bolvar had been transferred away. General Seamus became the temporary supreme commander here. He was very nervous, but when he saw Duque appear, he was obviously relieved. "Oh, ask her to come over." Not long after, Vara came over with 2 burly male Naga. "Master." Vara and the male Naga bowed together. Duque deliberately said in the Murloc language, "What's wrong? Are the Murlocs going to rebel?" "No, the old blind man and the other Murloc leaders have repeatedly asked to see you, Master, saying that there is a prophet who must see you. I can't suppress it, because tens of thousands of Murlocs followed their request." "You can't suppress it?" Duque was a little stunned. The Naga suppression on the Murlocs was absolute. It was like a tiger could easily clean up a lamb. Duque touched his chin. "This so-called prophet is a bit interesting. Sorry, I dare not be too forceful. After all, I have not yet recovered all the Naga forces on Hillsbrad Beach." "Oh." It's a Naga clan called Thorns that is active in the east of South Shore. Without the help of the Murlocs, it will be difficult for the current Furious Scale clan to complete the Master's task. When saying this, Vara's body was trembling slightly. The longer she followed Duque, the more she found Duque's strength and unfathomable. Vara was not an unintelligent creature. On the contrary, it was because of her high intelligence that she could see Duque's status and power. In Vara's view, hundreds of thousands of humans, nearly 100,000 troops, and more than 100 warships here were all led by Duque. Duque's order that the Naga and Murlocs were allies must be obeyed by hundreds of thousands of people. If the Murlocs hurt humans for no reason, they would naturally be severely punished. But a few days ago, a Stormwind officer was in a bad mood. He scolded a male Naga as a monster and stabbed the Naga. As a result, Duque ordered the officer to be whipped 20 times in front of tens of thousands of people and Vara. Most humans accepted this, but they could not understand it. Only Vara's loyalty silently rose to full value. In Vara's eyes, Duque was a real human king. Vara bowed. "Master, I strongly suggest that we appease the Murlocs first, and then deal with the Thorns Nagas. After all, the Thorns Nagas also have a considerable number of Murlocs under their command." Chapter 232. Which one is closer? I'm asking which one is closer, the spiny Naga or the Murloc prophet. We have to clean them up anyway, so let's go from the closest to the furthest. The Naga Siren priest's heart was suddenly in a mess. She finally realized the gap between her and her master. Her vision was still too low. In her mind, she was thinking about how to use the existing forces to suppress the opponent and expand the territory and the tribe. Her master was thinking about which one was closer. Sure enough, the difference in strength led to a different level of thinking. The spiny Naga is closer. Their leader is called Syphilis. "Lead the way," Duque said simply. At this time, seeing Duque rushing back in the middle of the night and leaving with the Naga, Seamus could not calm down. There was no doubt that Duque was important to Stormwind, and now Duque's position was even more important. The deputy commander of the Lordaeron Alliance. This was a big man with independent military power, and a lift of his foot could shake the earth 3 times. It was no exaggeration to say that if something happened to Duque, at least half of Stormwind's dream of restoring the country would be shattered. "Sir Marcus, are you leaving the camp?" "Well, there's something on the Naga side. Please be sure to wait until morning so that I can arrange guards for you." Duque waved his hand. "I can't wait. South Shore may become the main target of the Horde's attack within 10 days. I must recover all the Naga and Murlocs here before that." General Seamus resolutely stopped in front of Duque, but he bowed deeply and lowered his head. "Sir, please be aware of your status and importance. What you are shouldering now is not just your own dream, but the dream of restoring the country of nearly 1 million Storm citizens. If you insist on leaving at night, please be sure to bring enough guards." Duque was stunned. "It's not that exaggerated, just some Murlocs and Naga. I'm an expert in this area. I can't let the heavy infantry of the Griffin Legion run to the beach with me in heavy armor and then swim." General Seamus raised his hand, and Duque found several groups of people nearby were coming. Not only were there guards wearing full leather armor, holding short swords, hand crossbows, and small round shields, there was also a large group of Marines. If he said that he wasn't prepared, he would be lying. Seamus took out a warrant. His Majesty Rin has ordered that Duke Marcus is an important minister of the country. Before he has enough powerful knights around him, no less than 100 guards are allowed to go out at any time. Duque laughed involuntarily. He almost wanted to reveal the fact that he could be resurrected. However, Duque still accepted it. This is just a relaxing hunt. All right, take your hammers and other blunt weapons and set off. Remember to be gentle when you smash him. I want him alive. At 3 o'clock in the morning, with 200 guards and nearly 100 Nagas, Duque and his team went along the eastern beach of South Shore. Fighting at night in this era was a very troublesome thing. In the darkness, not to mention the warriors below, even General Tom Seamus, who was in charge of being the captain of the guards, had an instinctive panic in his heart. He even doubted how much combat power his subordinates could exert once they were attacked. They were already strong soldiers if they didn't scatter in panic at the beginning. If the opponent was an orc, Duque would definitely not dare to court death. But such a low-level Naga, in the past 10,000 years, most Nagas had lived at the bottom of the sea, and their vision was different from that of humans. Their vision was more of perception, just like what humans called night vision. On the contrary, the strong light of noon would have a considerable impact on them. They arrived at the place after 20 minutes. It was a great bay. The concave harbor was surrounded on 3 sides by cliffs that could not be climbed except by expert rock climbers. The remaining side was a beach. Duque and the others almost dripped water when they went in. All right, it's daybreak. Wake them up. Duque whistled. Seamus looked at the moon hanging high in the sky, and the muscles on his face trembled. 3 seconds later, the elite human soldiers who received the order began to shout, which easily alarmed the Nagas who were already extremely vigilant. A large number of Nagas rushed out of the caves under the cliffs, and of course, there were a small number of fishmen who were slaves. Duque noticed that the biggest difference between these guys and his angry and gray-scaled Nagas was that their arms and the fins on their backs were bright pink. Prepare for battle. General Seamus hadn't finished shouting. Duque shouted, "Close your eyes." Arcane fire magic circuit was fully activated. A huge fireball that was as bright as the noon sun jumped out of Duque's hand and flew at a high speed to a height of more than 30 meters before exploding. The violent flash was like an invisible wave sweeping across the battlefield. The spiny Nagas and their fishmen were all hit. The Nagas who were afraid of light, and the fishmen with big eyes, all covered their eyes in pain, bent over, or rolled on the ground. The enemies were all blind, while their own side was full of energy. In such a state, the spiny Nagas and fishmen could not stop the organized and disciplined slavers under Duque. Although they had good combat power, they could not even exert 10% of their combat power. Moreover, in a blind state, listening to the deafening roar in their ears, they became extremely flustered. Countless Nagas and fishmen waved their weapons in panic, and even poked their own people. Some wanted to escape back to the cave, and some instinctively wanted to escape into the water in panic. The enemies were in chaos. Most of the enemies on land were taken care of by Seamus's men, and those who rushed to the shallow water were dealt with by 1/3 of the male Nagas sent by Vara. All the guys who were blinded were knocked down in just 3 minutes. The defeat of the large force outside, in turn, caused the Nagas who were still staying in the cave to waver. Even if the leader of the spiny Nagas repeatedly howled, calling the Nagas to counterattack, not many red-finned Nagas dared to come out. Even if they came out, they would be served by several human hammers. This kind of whack-a-mole fighting style was popular with most people, although they almost did not believe that all this was really happening. As Duque said, "This is just an easy hunt. It was not even a warm-up battle. Come on, show your face." When Duque shot a fireball that could bend into the cave that was only 15 meters deep according to the system's scan, as the specially weakened fireball exploded, the blazing flame forced a female Naga priest with pink fins to roll out. 18 magicians' hands instantly subdued this Naga priest. Duque did not even look at her and directly threw her to Vara. Teach your kind well. If they refuse to surrender, kill them. The red-finned Naga priest and Vara trembled at the same time. Chapter 233. The first rays of dawn appeared. It was another morning. Although everyone who stayed in South Shore knew that a war was about to break out, the increasing strength still gave the townspeople and the defenders a lot of confidence. Especially this morning, the Nagas who once occupied the entire eastern coastline of the town all came to the beach to be scolded by the veteran Naga wearing the emblem of the 100-handed reaper. No one could understand the Naga language, but it did not prevent them from seeing those red-finned Nagas wearing a pair of special scale pauldrons, which represented the identity of Duke Marcus's private soldiers. Oh, as expected of the Sea King. The Storm Army said so. At this time, Duque was waiting for the tide to recede. Originally, Duque wanted to go and deal with the Fishman Prophet early in the morning, but he was told that the guy was on an island near the southwest coast of South Shore. That place was quite troublesome, with many submerged reefs. Even a small boat could easily be unlucky. If people wanted to go there, the best way was to wait for the tide to recede and directly pass through the exposed beach. If it was only Duque, then Duque would directly take the Nagas there. Unfortunately, General Seamus was with him, so he could only wait until the tide recede at noon. Soon it was close to noon. Duque and his party waited for the tide to recede, crossed the rocky coast, and came to an unnamed island. Damn, so many fishmen. There were fishmen in the sea, on the shore, and on the shore. Usually, the Murlocs were in groups of 2s and 3s, even on the beach. But now, Duke felt that the Murlocs were denser than the poor fish in a can of sardines. They were like a bunch of ants squeezed together. Although it was not to the extent that a needle could not be inserted, at least it was absolutely impossible for a sampan to sail in. There were scales everywhere, huge fish-shaped bodies, big eyes, and disproportionate ridiculous hands and feet everywhere. People with trypophobia were absolutely not suitable to see this scene. The arrival of Duque and his party caused a commotion. Vara tried to use the Naga's intimidation to seize control of these fishmen, but Vara failed again. Even though they were afraid and cowering, they never truly retreated or worshipped Walla. General Seamus' scalp went numb. Duke, I know that the Murlocs play a very important role in your defense plan, but I still strongly suggest that you evacuate first. We should gather more troops to control this situation. For example, let the Stormwind Navy come. Before the formal transfer of command, the former Bloodsail battleship docked on the coast of South Shore was still under Duque's command. From a reliable point of view, Zimos was absolutely right. Duque didn't want to do that. He controlled the fishmen by relying on his immature coercion and deception. To put it bluntly, it was tyranny. Once the pressure built on the terrifying legend was broken, Duque would never be able to control these fishmen again. Even though the fishmen were all trash, they were still very useful when there were a lot of them. For example, when they used the ice ship to transport 50,000 elite soldiers last time, they didn't have the fishmen to pull the ship. Were they supposed to let the soldiers soak their lower bodies in the water and kick around? Humph! Duque snorted coldly, and the arcane circuit in his body suddenly accelerated its circulation. The noon sun in mid-October was still very strong, but under Duque's terrifying magic power, the surrounding temperature dropped sharply. Beep, 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 beep. A series of explosions sounded, and in the distance of 100 meters in front of Duque to the shore of the island, a frozen road emitting a cold light was forming. The Murlocs screamed in horror and scattered to the left and right, lest they be sealed by the cold air. They instinctively sensed the existence of danger. In just a few seconds, a 5-meter-wide, 100-meter-long ice avenue reflecting the bright sunlight appeared in front of everyone. Gao Naka, the Sea King has been added. The Murlocs screamed. They flinched and made way for a wider passage. Tom, you stay back a little. Duque ordered softly, and then proudly filled the king's avenue that was emitting ice. On the left was the furious scale Naga priest, Walla, holding a long sword. On the right was the spiny Naga priest, Syphilis, holding a spear. Originally, The Naga priest had the highest status among the Nagas. Now the Naga priests of the two clans were crowding around Duque like serving as secular king, which made the Murlocs who had not joined Duque more and more frightened. The two Murlocs from the western wilderness, Blind Old Man and Fishspear, seemed to feel that something was wrong. These two guys actually rolled over and knelt on both sides of the ice avenue, trembling with fear. "Get out!" Duque snorted, and the arcane impact was released to the left and right at the same time. At once, the two guys with weak willpower flew out while vomiting blood. But the two guys seemed to realize that Duque was stronger. Regardless of their injuries, they came over and knelt a little further away. "I'll deal with you later," Duque said in the Murloc language. They came to the center of the island. Duque heard a voice with a mysterious rhythm. "Ga Murlocs are a great race." Duque was annoyed listening to it, so he simply let the system filter it and translated it directly. The thousands of Murlocs below all bowed down. "The oracle is right. The Murlocs only obey the true king of the sea. All creatures that do not belong to the sea are not worthy to be the ruler of the Murlocs." Thousands of Murlocs knelt down again. The oracle is right. At this time, at the highest point of the island, standing on a huge pink clamshell, holding a staff like a dragon's claw holding a green crystal ball, a strange Murloc with a large number of water elements wrapped around his right hand pointed the staff at Duque, who had 72 hands of magic. "So, this human, huh?" Duque sneered. The system had completely locked on this so-called oracle who had bewitched his Murlocs and betrayed them. This oracle was very good. As a Murloc, especially in this Murloc race with low intelligence, it was absolutely a miracle that such a Murloc with the strength of a peak sky mage could be born. However, what sky mage in front of Duque was definitely not enough. No matter what the reason was, as long as this Murloc prophet said something against Duque's rule, then even if he had to kill all the Murlocs here, Duque would not be merciful. At this moment, Duque's magic circuit had already circulated at full speed. All the space passages connecting the elemental realm had already been opened. All the elements in the surrounding atmosphere had already crawled under Duque's feet, waiting for Duque's command at any time. At this moment, the Murloc prophet's tongue seemed to be stuck. "What am I, a human?" Duque sneered. In his eyes, the Murloc prophet was already a dead fish. Suddenly, this Murloc prophet who called himself the Oracle opened his glistening yellow eyes wide and suddenly pointed at Duque. That's right. He is the Murlocs who appear once in 10,000 years, the one who will lead us to dominate the coast and make the Murlocs even greater." The Murlocs below all knelt down to worship Duque and shouted in unison like a tsunami, "The prophet is right. Greetings, my king." What? Chapter 234. Duque was a mess in the midday cold wind. Even though he was the one who created the cold air, Duque still felt that it was really cold and messy. Duque had 10,000 ways to increase the loyalty of the soldiers and civilians of Stormwind. Because they were all humans, they knew what people needed. To the Murlocs, Duque could only think of ways to maintain a mysterious atmosphere. Sometimes, Duque was even happy to keep his distance from the Murlocs, using the Murlocs' fear of the unknown to maintain a threatening posture. This way, he could maintain his strong control over the Murlocs. But this prophet suddenly bowed down to him. Duque was still very surprised. No matter what, this guy's actions before were to steal his people, and Duque had already made up his mind not to kill it. Break its arms and legs and let it be a real fish. Look at how kind I am. Now, the person who was at a loss was Duque. Over 10,000 Murlocs knelt down to him, and the Murloc prophet opened the giant clamshell it was standing on. Duque glanced at it. That thing actually looked a bit like a throne. "The great king of the ocean, Duke Marcus. Your servant Maugre has bowed to you." Maugre? The Oracle Maugre? Duque was absolutely sure that he had never heard of this guy. But the system notification said, "Congratulations, you have subdued the Murloc Oracle Maugre. It has supreme prestige among the Murlocs, its words are the law, and its language represents fate. You have successfully subdued it, which means that at least there will be no murlocs in the world who will be hostile to you. Duque frowned. On the other side, Mager took steps that were incomparably ridiculous in the eyes of humans, using its feet that only had 3 fingers and looked like duck feet to step on the sand on the island. It ran towards Duque and prostrated in front of Duque. "King of the Murlocs, please sit on your throne." Duque did not immediately agree. Instead, he sneered, "Didn't you just say that all creatures that do not belong to the sea are not worthy to be the ruler of the Murlocs? Why did you recognize me as your king?" The whites of Mager's yellow eyes and black vertical pupils quickly turned twice. In ancient times, there were no living creatures on the earth. The ocean. It was the cradle of all living things. In order to avoid the terrifying existence at the bottom of the sea, the first fisherman grew 4 limbs and walked to the shore. More mere people are doing it. Duque was a little embarrassed. Why did this story sound so familiar? Some Murlocs are not brave enough. They don't dare to break free from the shackles of the sea. They return to the sea, so they can only find a place to rest in the coastal waters. However, there was a group of brave people who continued to venture into the depths of the continent. After millions of years, they became humans. And Duke Marcus is the destined king among the fishmen's inheritors. Duque choked. *CK, Darwin's theory of evolution actually became like this when it came to you? Alright, do you want me to write the word convinced for you? Smart but slight. This was Duque's first impression of Mager. However, the funny fishman over there exclaimed and then bowed again. This scene made Duque speechless. Everyone remember, His Majesty Marcus is our real king. His power is above all the Nagas and sea creatures. Do you remember? Memory dash. The fishmen bowed for the 3rd time. The neat and exaggerated scene made the 2 Naga siren priests, General Seamus, and the Stormwind elite soldiers behind him completely dumbfounded. What the hell is this? People often said that Duque was the Sea King, but Seamus never believed it. He thought it was just an honorific title. Even when he saw Duque commanding the Nagas and the fishmen, he thought that Duque just used some special means. Who would have thought that he would really witness such a ceremony of worshipping the king? Sitting on the huge clam covered with pearls, Duque was still not used to it. He accidentally thought that if the clam was actually a trap, he would be killed as soon as he sat on it and couldn't be resurrected. Then this story was really a masterpiece. Duque thought too much. At this time, Duque suddenly found that Mager actually used some kind of spiritual connection to directly hover outside Duque's spirit sea, waiting for the call to be connected. Duque thought about it for a moment, but still answered the call. "Your Majesty, Mager is at your service." "Enough, I'm just a human powerhouse. Why are you doing this?" Duque's voice suddenly became cold. No, Mager and the fishmen are sincerely kneeling at the feet of your Majesty." "Huh? First inciting them to disobey the orders of my messenger, then saying that they are loyal to me?" Duque completely sneered. "That's because Mager doesn't know the greatness of your Majesty and the horror." In the spiritual connection, Mager's posture was already prostrating on the ground. Oh! Duque was interested. Mager doesn't want any fishmen to surrender to a false king, but is willing to pay absolute loyalty to a real overlord. Overlord? Yes. Mager not only saw your Majesty's power, but also felt the hundreds of thousands of wronged souls entangled around your Majesty. Only a peerless overlord can do such a great thing. Compared to your Majesty who can change the fate of so many creatures, the entire fishman race is just an insignificant existence. Duque squinted his eyes. "You can see the wronged souls around me?" "No, I can only feel the strong breath of fate." Mager continued to kneel. "All right, I'll forgive your rudeness for the last time. But next time, I'll let the Nagas and deep-sea giants cut off your path of retreat. I'll let all the humans on the land surround you and kill the last fishman in the world." Duque's words made Mager tremble all over, both in the spiritual world and in the real world. "All right, let's go. From now on, 60% of the fishmen will listen to Vara, and 40% to Syphilis. As for you, Mager, you'll be Vara's assistant." "Yes, your Majesty." Duque rubbed his eyebrows and sighed softly. Finally, the defensive system of South Shore was completed. After returning to South Shore, Duque welcomed King Lang on the 15th. After traveling day and night, Lang rushed back. The teleportation portal of a mage is so convenient. If your magic was stable enough, I'd rather come back with you. Sigh. Mediva's teleportation was only stable when he became a Breaking Dawn mage. Before that, it was always terrible. Lang did not forget to complain about his dead friend. What's the news? Andoin and the others finally agreed to station the main force in South Shore. Main force? Yes, they feel that the orcs have a high chance of going around the west and landing at the North Stream coast. So, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Infantry Regiments of Gilness and half of the forces of Rotterdam will be stationed there. The 2nd Fleet led by Prince Kultiras has also rushed over. Duque immediately frowned. Chapter 235. Duque wanted to curse out loud. Isn't this bullsh*t? To hell with the North Stream coast. Historically, Orgrim's army did not even travel there. Lang could tell that Duque was unhappy, so he put his hand on Duque's shoulder and walked to the Alliance's headquarters in South Shore. It was a stone bunker that was about 4 stories high. This blockhouse had been built at the end of last month. Not only could it overlook the seaside, but it was also far enough away from the seaside. More importantly, if they didn't take down the 2 hills that surrounded South Shore, they wouldn't be able to threaten this place. As for those 2 hills, they had long since been melted by Fort Duke. Lang looked at the map and said in one breath, "Actually, our forces here are already very strong. Most of the army will still be gathered here. After all, the Alliance chose to station here because this place is in the center of the Eastern Kingdom, and we can quickly use ships to travel to any corner of the continent. We have 50,000 veterans, 50,000 new soldiers, and nearly 100,000 militia who have undergone basic military training. Of course, this is all we have. If we use it all, there are almost no men left in Stormwind. What we lack are cavalry and archers. Fortunately, in 3 days, the Highland Knights and the 3rd Infantry will arrive. That way, we will have 1,000 cavalry and 6,000 light infantry. Almost at the same time, Alterax's Eagle Knights and the 2nd Mountain Infantry will also arrive. 4 days later, the 2nd Dalajan Mage Division and the 1st and 2nd Infantry will arrive. And Lord Aaron's Grand Duke Mograine and General Abendis's Scarlet Cross will only arrive in at least 10 days. After listening to Lang's narration, Duque sighed. According to the military mobilization capabilities of this era, this was already a very impressive speed. Do not think that the Highland Knights of the Highland Knights were stationed next to the Saladin Wall between the Arthy Highlands and the Hillsbrad Hills. It was less than a day's journey from the east to the west to South Shore. In fact, when the army set off, there were as many things to do as the stars in the sky. And this was because of the invasion of the orcs. The various countries had already entered a state of war. If it was during peaceful times, it would probably take even longer. Similarly, the Dalajan to the northwest of South Shore and Alterac to the north weren't too far away. Both of them could be reached within a day on a fast horse. Duque was already burning incense for being able to arrive so quickly. These standing armies were also the foundation of the various countries. If Duque easily wiped them out, it would not be so easy when he wanted them again. On November 5th, when the last batch of soldiers arrived at the huge barracks outside South Shore, there were already 2 commanders-in-chief, 7 kings, and more than 30 generals gathered in the hilltop command post. Everyone was full of praise for the barracks that Duque had set up in advance. They had built a large circle of wooden walls in advance, as well as well-positioned arrow towers. Furthermore, every military camp was close to the river, making it easy to obtain water. At the same time, for the sake of the army's attack, several spacious roads were planned in advance. With this arrangement, the generals of the various countries almost thought that they were leading an army on a long journey to train. As Lothar's adjutant, Turalian reported to the kings. First is the information from the copper-bearded dwarves. The Iron Furnace Fort is still besieged by nearly 100,000 orcs. According to the battle flags, the main force of the siege should be the tribe's Blood Ring clan. Turalian first placed 10 statues of 10,000 orcs on top of the Iron Furnace Fort. Then there is the Solder Bridge. After repeated investigations by Stromgarde's Griffin Knights, the number of orcs here will not be less than 50,000. Turalian then placed 5 orcs on the bridge. Finally, there is the wetland. According to the investigation of Deputy Commander Marcus Naga and Fishmen, at the edge of the wetland on the south coast of the sea, more than 200,000 orcs have built at least 20,000 transport ships. This kind of transport ship can carry about 30 orc warriors, and the medium can carry about 100 people. For the time being, there is no large enemy ship. Then we have confirmed the banners of the big clans in the wetland camp. They are Blackstone, Warsong, Fireblade, Dragon Maw, Storm Reaver, Twilight Hammer, and Scar. Including the orcs, a conservative estimate of the tribe's total population is more than 600,000. Fortunately, the map was large enough, a full 3 meters by 3 meters. Otherwise, the wetland area would not be able to accommodate 60 orc statues. Although they knew that the orcs were powerful, after knowing the number of the enemy, the big bosses could not help but exclaim, the entire South Shore army added up to more than 200,000. What are you afraid of? If all the ships are of this quality, even if there are 10 times more of them, Kurtiras, can destroy them all without the need for an alliance. Dallin said confidently. Indeed, even though South Shore's dock had been expanded by Duque again and again, there were 5 stone docks that stretched nearly 150 meters away from the coast, but it still could not accommodate all the ships. Through the window of the fort, the kings looked at the sea in front of them. Not only did Proudmoore's ships dock at the head of the dock, but they were also docked along the entire coastline. From small fast scout ships to standard destroyers, to huge warships that were more than 100 meters long, the waves rose and fell, forming a forest of warships that rose and fell on the surface of the sea. This was only Kurtiras's first and third fleets, as well as the Storm Fleet, which only had 100 warships. There was also a second fleet on the other side of the North Stream coast, and Kurtiras's home defense fleet had not been deployed yet. Every king felt a sense of pride, and suddenly they were filled with confidence. How could there be someone or something that could resist such a powerful fleet? No, it wasn't just the fleet. After being caught off guard and unable to adapt to the situation, both sides began to form tactics, and the human side's casualties began to plummet. At the beginning, it was 1 orc warrior for 10 human soldiers, but now it was 1 for 2 or 3. If it was a well-organized formation of human soldiers, even on the plains, 100 human soldiers with a complete set of soldiers could easily defeat 100 orc warriors. But then, Lothar could not help but imagine the scene of the horde taking down the Riedridge Mountains, sweeping through the elven forest, and bathing the entire Stormwind in blood. It was a green sea that no one could truly stop. Lothar took a deep breath, and his expression became determined again. In the past, the Stormwind army was weak, but now the Alliance army was many times stronger than the Stormwind army. No matter what, they could stop the horde's attack. Chapter 236. Alright, this is all the troops we have now. Noxus clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. I know it takes a long time for a country to go from peace to war. Thank you, kings, for your efforts and support. What we have to think about now is how to use these troops to win a series of beautiful battles. I don't expect to destroy the entire tribe in one battle, but I hope to lead everyone to win from one victory to another. The kings and generals immediately applauded. At this time, Duque suddenly laughed. Respected Chief Commander, it seems that this is not all the troops you have now. Noxus was really stunned for a moment. The troops that the 7 human kingdoms had promised to send were all here, apart from those deployed at the North Flow coast. The dwarves were still busy with their own affairs, so there was no way they could spare any troops. How did you forget about the High Elves? At this moment, Duque's face was glowing with excitement. Anyone could see how happy he was. The High Elves? Impossible! Didn't they not join the Alliance? The kings discussed. That Bulsh *T counselor. King Alterac Eden was not stingy with his venomous tongue. Antonidas seemed to think of something and stroked his long white beard. It would be impossible if someone else were to be the commander. But the commander is you, Anduin Lothar. That's another matter. Have you forgotten? The High Elves have signed an ancient covenant with us humans since the time of Thoradin the Great. An ancient covenant? Noxus muttered to himself. He suddenly remembered that there was such a thing. But there had been too many things recently, and the High Elves had been so cold to him that Noxus had almost forgotten about it. The old but sly Antonidas stroked his white beard and looked at the restless Duque. He laughed. Haha, I think it's better for the two commanders to welcome them. Antonidas was indeed steady. He knew that Senator Darkin's behavior on the day of the alliance had angered most of the kings. For the sake of face, most of the kings would definitely not go. And it would definitely not be the Sun King himself. In that case, it was completely reasonable for them not to welcome him. At this moment, a sentry hurriedly ran to the door of the command center and reported, "The elves are here." "Oh, we already knew that," Lothar said lightly. "You knew?" "We only received a report from the patrol when the elven ships were almost 5 nautical miles away." The voice of the sentinel, who was obviously from Cultivation, sounded a little bitter. Lothar didn't blame the poor sentry. "It's okay. The Nagas and Murlocs under the deputy commander are also patrolling the sea around South Shore." Hearing this, the sentinel retreated with relief. Lothar looked around and said, "All right, Your Majesties and Excellencies, the arrival of the elves represents the attitude of a powerful country on the continent. If you are willing, come with me to welcome the messenger of the Sun King Anastrian. The rest of you can rest here for a while." After some consideration, Lang, Dai Lin, and Antonidas followed Lothar, Duque, and Turayan to the dock. Although Dai Lin couldn't put down his pride, he was very concerned about how many ships the elves could bring for him, the admiral and commander-in-chief of the sea fleet. Lang simply wanted to see the alliance become stronger. As for Antonidas, no one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, more than 20 ships with typical High Elves characteristics were darting across the sea like arrows. I can't wait to see how those humans are panicking. Just now, I asked my men to completely avoid the patrols of their ships and come in through the gaps in the patrol net. Anyway, with such a good view in broad daylight, they wouldn't mistake the High Elves' ships for the orcs, right? A calm voice interrupted the first voice. "Sorry, the humans discovered us as early as 10 nautical miles ago." "How is that possible?" the first voice exclaimed. "My intuition tells me that's the case. Although I didn't find any human ships, I felt that there were more than one pair of eyes on me. I can't be wrong." Walking out of the command center and to the top of the mountain near the sea, the people looked at the elven ships that were sailing towards the port in the distance. Compared to the tall hulls of the humans, the elven ships were much flatter. The long and streamlined hull was made of hard starwood that could only be found in the forests of Cuel Salis. Not only was it hard, but it was also lighter than most shipwood. Not only were there many intricate patterns carved on the hull, but there were also dozens of enchanted throwing carts mounted on the sides of the hull. Formed by 3 sharp cones, the huge triangular throwing carts did not lose out to the ordinary human cannons in terms of range. The ship's bow was a classic example of a hippogriffon pecking at a bird. At full speed, this seemingly decorative bow could also be used as a ram, allowing the elven ships to cut through the hulls of warships of medium or lower like a knife cutting through butter, completely crushing them. "Elven destroyers," naval expert Dalen Proudmoore said softly. "They are faster and lighter than our Cultira ships. They carry fewer weapons, but it still gives these ships considerable speed. This is a good addition to our fleet." "No, it's an excellent addition." After saying that, the admiral frowned. "But isn't this too little? I only saw 8 light speedboats and 16 ultralight scout boats. This is only the configuration of 2 combat squads. Maybe there are more behind the horizon?" Turalian said in a comforting tone from the other side of Lothar. Dalen shook his head with certainty. "This is not their habit. If there are no surprises, this is all they have." Dalen's tone was filled with indescribable disappointment. Perhaps Duque's generosity had made him look forward to more, but the greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. Dalin's desire for more warships grew especially after he had no choice but to divide his forces to guard the sea near the North Flow coast. He knew very well that it was impossible to protect the entire coastline of the northern continent with such a small fleet. 24 ships also means that our fleet has an additional 24 ships. Duque comforted Dalin. As you said, this is an excellent addition to our fleet. Chapter 237. Dalin was startled, but he quickly chased away the slight disappointment in his heart. After all, the elves were not supposed to join the alliance, and if you looked at it from the perspective of profiting, then it was true. He nodded and agreed with Duke's words. All right, your majesties, gentlemen, at all events we must go and welcome them with grace. Lothar was saying, don't be so narrow-minded. Since everyone else was here, they naturally agreed. Thus, they began to ride down the mountain and through the village. Even though Antonidas was in his 60s, he was still able to climb up the horse with ease. If it were the king of Tyrrhenus, he would probably need to climb up the stairs and have 5 or 6 people in front and behind him to get up. When they arrived at the pier and dismounted, the first elven warship had just docked. A tall and slender figure jumped down. Her footsteps were so light that there was almost no sound when she landed on the stone pier. It was as if she had landed on a ball of cotton. His long golden hair, which reached his waist, reflected the sunlight and emitted a dazzling radiance. Lothar and Duque heard more than one person gasping for air around them. Of course, the one who gasped the loudest was Turalyon, who was beside Lothar. When everyone saw this figure clearly, they were even more shocked by the other party's incomparably dazzling and enchanting beauty that they were speechless. Unlike most of the high elves, who had a delicate figure and pale skin, her figure was actually extremely fit and beautiful despite looking a little delicate. Unlike the mainstream rulers of the high elves, the spellcasters who liked fancy clothes, her clothes were either forest green or oak brown. She wore a pure white shirt with a breastplate and shorts that revealed half of her thighs. A hooded emerald green cloak was flung behind her, and a pair of light brown leather gloves covered her from her fingers to her elbows. Her boots were the same, protecting her knees. A thin sword with a white scabbard and a green blade hung from her belt on her left hip. On her right was a small pouch and a small communication horn. She carried a longbow and a quiver full of arrows on her back. Of course, because the back was slanted, the bowstring passed through the middle of the pair of peaks, making them look even more impressive. Dalin, Lang, and Lothar were all high-ranking figures in the kingdom, and they were always surrounded by beautiful women. In this day and age, a noble man would be embarrassed to come out and greet others if he didn't have many lovers. Not to mention the widowed Lothar, the handsome middle-aged man, Lothar, was definitely a model for attracting bees and butterflies. However, only a few of them could come close to the beauty of this female elf. But no matter which one of them it was, they had never seen anyone who could combine fitness and elegance so perfectly. Noxus could very well understand why his adjutant, Turalyon, who had just been baptized as a holy knight and was known for his many virtues such as justice and piety, was captivated by her. At this moment, the greatest tragedy occurred. It was tragic because the table was full of cutlery. Turalyon, who was quietly expressing his love, looked at the mysterious goddess in his heart and softly exclaimed, "Darling, I miss you so much." He then threw himself at Duque and pushed him to the ground. Her beautiful face rubbed against Duque's chest like a puppy rubbing against a human. Anyone would think that this female elf and Duque had an extraordinary deep love. At this moment, Turalyon felt that the heart he had cherished for more than 20 years was broken. It was crushed by one of his superiors, the Duke Marcus, who had an even more glorious battle record. Although Turalyon knew that his unconfessed love was not worth mentioning, he could not control his feelings. His mouth moved as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he could only remain silent. They were originally a couple. Was he going to break them up just because of love at first sight? Absolutely not. The paladin's discipline firmly suppressed Turalyon's emotions, and soon, Turalyon's rationality prevailed. Noxus gently patted Tyrian's shoulder as a silent consolation. However, no one had expected that the situation would suddenly take a miraculous turn at this moment. Apologies, beautiful lady. May I ask, which of the Windrunner are you? Duque typed with both hands to show his innocence. Oh no, it was the back of his hands on the ground to show his innocence. At the same time, he looked straight at the seemingly interesting but actually empty sky. His body stiffened and his face turned into a poker face. What does this mean? Noxus and the other big shots were dumbfounded. Duque and this beautiful elf were not lovers? Then, was this beauty pouncing on Duque considered an assault? What the hell was this? Logically speaking, the guards around him should have made a move, but no one dared to act rashly. The circle of nobles was messy. One wrong move would mean death. At this moment, the second elven warship docked next to the first elven warship. A green figure suddenly flew out when the ship was 5 meters away from the shore. A furious female yell came from the air. Servanas, what are you doing? Upon hearing this voice, the elf lady on top of Duque and Duque shuddered at the same time. The elf woman, who was now Servanas, stuck out her tongue and lightly pressed her left index finger on the ground. Her entire body bounced up like a spring, and she stood in front of the big shots of the Alliance with a straight face, as if nothing had happened. Looking at her dignified beauty with a smile on her face, no one would have thought that she was the one who had just pounced on the Alliance's vice commander. Noxus and the others were tongue-tied. They felt like they were in a whirlwind. They were not the only ones in a whirlwind. Duque was also in a whirlwind. His back was drenched in cold sweat. That was close. If I didn't clearly remember my relationship with Aurelia, I wouldn't have gotten to this point. If I was really a pervert just a little bit, even if I had 9 lives, I would be a dead cat now. Damn it. That's the legendary Queen Sylvanas. Queen Sylvanas who hasn't become an undead yet. Duque felt very confused. He couldn't tell what this feeling was. In general, he could only say that it was good to see Queen Sylvanas. On the other side, the main character, Illyria, had finally made her way over and grabbed Servana's long, pointy ears. Sister. Pain. I know I was wrong. Don't treat me like this in front of so many kings, okay? It's very rude. Chapter 238. Duque, who raised his head, saw an extremely embarrassing scene. Queen Sylvanas, who was at the pinnacle of the forgotten in the future, was now being punished by her sister by twisting her ear. However, why was Sylvanas here? You know how to be rude? Think about what you've just done. After quickly dealing with her sister who had gone berserk, Aurelia walked over and apologized to Lothar, who was surrounded by the crowd and should have the highest status. I'm very sorry. I'm Aurelia Windrunner, the Ranger Major General of Kuel Salis. My sister, Sylvanas Windrunner, is actually a Ranger General too. It's just that she made a very bad joke just now. I'm here to sincerely ask for your forgiveness. Her voice was very pleasing to the ears, and just her voice alone was enough to make people feel guilty. It made people wonder if she would scold people in extreme anger. Would her voice sound like she was singing? Looking at the dumbfounded Duque on the ground, Lothar also laughed heartily. He looked around at the kings, and saw that they were all smiling. It's just a harmless joke. I don't think any magnanimous king would mind such a small thing, right? The 3 kings nodded. Alright, welcome here. I'm Anduin Lothar, the Commander-in-Chief of the Rotterdam Alliance. Thank you, and thank you for your understanding. Aurelia stared at her sister, and bowed again to apologize. She then walked over to Duque, who refused to get up, and extended her right hand to Duque. She wanted to help Duque up. Duque blinked, and was thinking if he should give her a hug that he hadn't had for a long time, when Aurelia's voice suddenly came from the wind. Little guy, don't make it more difficult for me, alright? Get up first, we'll talk in private later. I don't want to cause any international disputes. Just as Duque was about to say something, a second voice came from the wind. It was Servanas's voice. Yo, my sister, you're not being honest. How is Mr. Duke Marcus a little guy? He's clearly a handsome young man. Aurelia instantly blushed, and the crimson color spread all the way to the top of her long pointed ears. If Aurelia hadn't bent down so that her golden hair could cover her face, she would probably have made a fool of herself. To be honest, Duque still had no idea what was going on. But it was probably a good thing. However, when he heard Aurelia and her sister conversing in the whisper of the wind that no one else could hear, Duque had a feeling that Cervantes had pounced on him just now was definitely some sort of test? Now that there were dozens of pairs of eyes staring at them, it wasn't a good time to talk in detail. Duque pretended that nothing was wrong, and put one hand on Aurelia's palm. As expected of the legendary goddess-like hero. Her hand was so soft. Was that incomparably smooth and soft palm really the palm that could shoot countless fatal arrows? How did the body of the high elves grow? It was actually so perfect. Even Duque was a little restless at this moment. On the other side, Aurelia, who had quickly adjusted her breath and raised her head, regained her previous demeanor. However, there was still an unconcealable wildness in her emerald green eyes. She looked at Lothar. My apologies. In fact, I brought greetings from the Sun King, an Astrian Sunstrider, and the Silver Moon Council. Thank the Sun King and the Silver Moon Council for me. Lothar turned half of his body and made an introduction gesture to the group of big shots behind him. Please allow me to introduce the kings of the Alliance, the generals, and my adjutant. When it came to Duque, Lothar smiled mischievously. Well, I'll ignore this one. I think Lady Aurelia may have a deeper understanding of him than I do. In the face of Lothar's teasing, Aurelia blushed slightly again, and immediately glared at the troublemaking second sister. Well, Queen, she was whistling. After the introduction, Lothar began to enter the serious topic. Please forgive my slowness and harshness, Lady Aurelia. However, as the commander of the Alliance, I have to confirm one thing. Is this all the help your people have provided? What's coming has come. After thinking to herself, Aurelia decided to be frank. Your Excellency Lothar, please forgive my straightforwardness. Aurelia stepped forward and looked around to make sure that no one was eavesdropping. She said softly, His Majesty an Astrian and the members of the Silver Moon Council do not care much about the dynamics of the tribe. This so-called tribe is too far away from our territory. Moreover, Councillor Dalkin has repeatedly claimed in the council that it is because humans have angered nature by logging too much, so they are taking revenge on humans. Bullsh asterisk, that bastard has ears. Lothar was furious. Sorry, I'm not talking about you. It's okay. In fact, not many people support his views. However, the councillors generally think that the tribe is trying to conquer the human territory, not our forests. So they think it's best to leave the struggle to the younger races. We only need to strengthen our borders to prevent any possible invasion. That's enough. Hearing this, Lothar could not hide the sadness on his face. This meant that there was no possibility of more troops. Even if he did not want to admit it, he had to admit that the High Elves mages and rangers were all elite troops that any commander dreamed of. They could often play a decisive role on the battlefield. However, there was no hope for anything now. At this time, Duque smiled. But I see two ranger generals standing in front of us. It was not just the Windrunner sisters. A large number of elves were disembarking. Only now did everyone notice that almost all the elven ships were fully loaded. There were both men and women in this group of elves, and they quickly gathered. One look at their aura and expressions, and it was obvious that they were elite rangers who had seen blood. They were not rookies at all. At a rough glance, there were more than 1,000 of them. 2 ranger generals and an elite troop of more than 1,000 people. This could not be said to be insignificant. Duque suddenly realized that there was another short-haired version of Aurelia. 3 Windrunner? All ranger generals? Duque, Lothar, and the others could not hide the surprise on their faces. Aurelia raised her hand. Oh, this is our 4th sister, Lilith. She is now the ranger captain. At this point, the apparently gentler Lilith nodded towards him and continued to order her subordinates to organize their troops. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.